as it happens, only on Q95. My guest tonight, if someone has your mic open, if you could mute your mic, please. It's giving us a lot of feedback here. Thanks so much for that. And my guest tonight is Dr. Irving Andre, who is in Canada. Attorney Gabriel Christian, who is in Maryland, is going to join us shortly. He's in the US, in Maryland. The economist Dr. Thomson Fontaine is in South Sudan. Political scientist Dr. Dion George is in Atlanta, Georgia. And sociologist Simeon Joseph, he's in Dominica. He's with us tonight. So we are continuing to revive the spirit of graciousness, of love, of peace, of prosperity, and unity among our Dominican, Kalinago, and Afro-Caribbean people. But tonight we want your views, we want your calls. So Lambi will take your calls a bit later to us. The topic that we're looking at tonight is Dominica is at a crossroads and it needs a new direction. That is the topic. We heard recently the CCJ finally weighed in and commented about the matter of tainted elections. And what should we expect, therefore, from Sir Dennis Byron? This long outstanding report that we expect from him with recommendations and draft legislation, so quite apart from what the Dominica civil society and international organizations have already presented to our electoral commission, other than the imperative for urgent electoral and campaign finance reform, free and fair elections, greater social responsibility, good governance, and in order to do away with victimization, divisiveness, crime, violence, human rights violations, which is now abundant, child abuse, and then to bring back social, cultural, and economic stability. Here are some questions that we need to answer together, all of us, wherever we are in the world, wherever we are in the world. I mean, we have to do this together. So, Quo Vadis, Dominica? Where is Dominica going? Where are you heading? Are you going to have another tainted election? I didn't say that. It was the CCG who said that. Are you going to have foreign resident Dominicans flying in to subvert the will of the voters? Are you going to hit the CCJ's call? What is residency? If you live in New York and your residence is in New York, that's your address. Can you be resident in Dominica as well? Why will Sir Byron clarify that for us? We'll talk about that a little later. So, what did the CJJ have to say about Justice Glasgow's ruling? Maybe our learned justice on our panel will tell us something more about it. He seemed to have had a few choice words to say about that in the ruling and the recommendations that came out of the CCJ. What did the CCJ have to say about, I'm sorry, about will you, in fact, tolerate yet another, yet again, the rape of free and fair elections in Dominica? Where do we go from here? What should you do? Do you know what to do? I know what we should do after the CCJ's recent decision. Is Dennis Byron going to reinforce or hinder the normalization and the legitimization of bribery and treating, of voting by foreign resident Dominicans? What are we going to do? Where are we going to head it, Dominica? What are we going to do about that? Well, some say that the CCJ knew of the DPP nolly pros in a case that they had already sent back to the court, and about other wrongdoings. Did the CCJ indicate there might have been a questionable ruling by that learned Court of Appeal Judge Glasgow? Did they indicate that in the submission? Others say now is the time to act against the ruling mafia. We have some questions. Is there a ruling mafia in Dominica? Let's find out. So here are a few other things here. From a land of honor, we used to think of Dominica, this is Nature Island, as a land of honor. To a leadership of hungry hyenas, did we hear something like that from these people, what they call themselves? Al Jazeera spoke about hungry hyenas. Is the CCJ aware of crimes in our regime? The CCJ is certainly aware of the DPP throughout the case. after they rendered judgment that it should be heard in the court. They must have heard about that. The CCJ must be aware of the oppression of the Democratic opposition and their arrest on these bogus incitement charges. I'm not sure why the opposition will not in one voice challenge the court to throw out and dismiss this case for want of prosecution. It seems as though it's dead. It's been dead for 5 years. Has the government plundered billions and built palaces, stashed billions in offshore accounts and impoverished the nation? These are just questions that people are asking. I'm just reflecting the questions that the people have been asking. Is chaos reigning in our supreme? Is chaos reigning supreme in our police service? Has it descended into an armed group that answers only to the ruling party, disregarding its duty to be a professional, unbiased entity that protects and serves the people, not the ruling party? Is all of this happening in an economy of just 60,000 people who could live very well if honest, law-abiding people were in power? People who do not make a habit of lying and cheating. So all of those things we're asking tonight, and I'm sure that Dr. Andre will help us with looking at some of those when he comes on. What happened to the value or the virtue of service above self? What is the true cost of this thing called civility? Should we work hard and make personal sacrifices to achieve our ambitions and be independent rather than to be made to wait like beggars for handouts? What does it profit a man or a woman who gains the whole world but loses his or her soul? So Justice Dr. Irving Andre, Attorney Gabriel Christian a little later on when he joins us, economist Dr. Thomson Fontaine, political scientist Dr. Dion George, and sociologist Simeon Joseph. They will help us unravel some of the answers and solutions for the way forward for Dominica. So tonight, we will probably, in the last quarter of our show, explore a lot of those solutions. Certainly, we hope Dr. Fontaine will tell us how we can get to the point where we can return the honor and bring our economy back to what it used to be, put it in the right direction. Hope Dr. Andrew and Dr. Dion George and so on will talk about the CCJ ruling and the whole question of electoral reform. We hear all kinds of things coming out lately that Dominica is a paradise, everything is working so great. The young people, they really things are going well for them. So Simeon Joseph is here. We'll talk about the young people and their future and what has been happening, what is happening now, and where they're going if we keep going the way we are going now. So we will discuss the good, the bad, the ugly, and even the dangerous, but without anger, without malice, so no personal attacks, no vilification, no divisiveness, just simply bringing back the civility that we really yearn for so much again, a caring society, and most important, good governance, recognizing this real imperative for justice without delays, and the resilience and sustainability of our Kalinago and Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters. Your voices tonight at home and abroad, we will give it priority. I would want Lambi to take the calls as they come. We'll want you to answer questions. People who live in the Marigot Wesley area, you hear a lot of talk about airport being built. Is there work going on at the airport as we speak? The people from Marigot and Wesley can call and tell us tonight if there's work going on there. All right. So stay tuned with us for another great debate, and we're hoping to give the answers to the questions that you have. So wherever you are in Dominica, in the region, and any part of the global community, please join us, stay with us in this space for another great debate. So as usual, a huge shout out and hugs and much love and appreciation. A big thank you to our healthcare providers and frontline workers. I know they're doing their best to keep us safe from these wicked viruses, and they're often working under very, very difficult conditions. We reach out to you, we embrace you. Please follow their correct advice and guidelines and protocols and stay safe, please, everybody. Happy to have you with us tonight. We welcome you warmly, embrace you, that will be with us on Facebook and YouTube and wherever you are. We embrace you, we welcome you, we cherish you. Thank you so much to Sherwin for keeping us on the air in crystal clear liquid stereo, and to Lambi on the console who's going to direct your calls. All right, so let's get started. And as we get started, I really tonight I want to break from our usual, and I want to go first to Dr. Thomson Fontaine because he's out there in that neck of the woods there. It's past his bedtime, and we want to be able to release him early if he needs to go early because he needs to get to work in the morning. In fact, just now. So we'll go first to him because I was hoping that Dr. Fontaine can do something for us. Let's look, Dr. Fontaine, at the big picture. Give us this overview, this view of what is it, where we've been, what is going on, why we are here we are now, all of the social, the cultural, the economic, all the crime things, what it is that has brought us to where we are now. And then let us see the discussion. We'll identify all the problems that you identify that bring us to where we are on the brink now. We will all take a look at that when we come up. It's our turn to speak. We'll examine all of those, and at the end, all of us together, we will want to share our own solutions to the problems, whether it's political, whether it's economic or social or whatever it is. We are looking for solutions when we want to guide the Dominican people who are listening. We have a window now because the justices have told us we're doing something wrong. We need to fix it. They said, do not go back into another election with that thing y'all are doing there. Let's take the advice. Dr. Thomson Fontaine, if you could open your mic and you could just join us as soon as you're ready, because we're ready for you to come in now.
Indeed, Mr. G, a very good evening to you and to the distinguished panelists, Mr. Simeon, of course, and Dr. Andre, Dion, Lambi, good night, and to all the many listeners. It's indeed an honor to be here tonight, and also to start the batting as well, to open the batting, as we say, by going. It's a pleasure. Mr. G, as you were talking, I could not help but reflect on the situation as it is now in Dominica. And I started listing down a series of what I call problems or issues that are currently facing Dominica. And it is not a pretty picture at all. And to my fellow Dominicans, especially those who are living in Dominica, I'm sure they can identify with some of those issues that I would highlight. I want to start with Dominica's economy. And I want to talk about how we have an economy which is simply not working for the Dominican people. What do I mean by this? I mean that this economy has not shown any growth. It has not been able to create jobs. In fact, the few jobs that we've had have been lost, particularly within the private sector. Businesses have been shut down right, left, and center. A number of businesses have reduced in size. Even now, as I speak to you, businesses are closing down. Inflation is rampant. We have all sorts of issues when it comes to the price. We have electricity prices being at a point where the average person is becoming poorer. In other words, if you made $1,000 2 months ago, you're not able to purchase the same amount of goods and services if it's $1,000 today. So what this means effectively, people's what we call the real income, that earning power of individuals is being drastically reduced because of inflation, and you know it. The way you know it's real is when you go to shop at a supermarket, whether it's at AC Shillingford's, at Astafans, at Minias, wherever you go, you step into the supermarket and you buy the same goods that you used to buy 2 months ago. And you realize all of a sudden that the amount of money that you need to pay has probably doubled. Or you cut down on the amount that you're taking and you still pay the same amount that you were paying the last time. So what this means effectively is that people's earning, their real incomes, have been drastically reduced. So the economy is in a state of complete shambles. The unemployment level is also extremely high, and this employment is high unemployment levels is, I believe, a main contributor to the levels of violence that we see in Dominica today. Dominica, I speak to you, is a very violent society. I'm sorry to say it. Why do I say it's a violent society? Well, if you have 13 murders in a country within 6 months of a year, 13 lives cut short, the majority of them cut short at the barrel of a gun, then you know that you're in serious trouble. There was a time when you would barely see a murder in Dominica. It would take probably, 5 years to have 2-3 murders. Now 13. That's an epidemic. That is a real serious problem that we have. So there are lots of social issues that are linked to this. We have school dropouts. We have young people dropping out of school. We have this whole social, what we call social deviance, where people are rebelling against society, young people, and not society simply not working for them. So you have one of those issues. Then there is the issue of governance, where we have a government that is extremely arrogant, a government that is incapable of providing leadership to the people of Dominica. And a very good example of this is I heard the Honorable Minister Blackmore, Minister of National Security, referring to the unprecedented number of murders as nonsense. He says it's nonsense, has to stop. Mr. Blackmore, this is not nonsense. This is a serious national crisis. And there is that inability of the government to deal with this. There is this inability of the government to really offer solutions to those problems that we are facing. And of course, there is the issue of the political situation in Dominica. Government that is convinced that will do everything in its power to continue to frustrate the will of the Dominican public. The government, even as we speak, Mr. G, they are planning how to steal the next election. This government has invested millions and millions and millions of dollars, as we saw in the last budget of the elections of 2019. Over $20 million invested to win an election through trickery, through theft, and through other means that are not legal. And so it's in that situation we've seen the CCJ offer a ray of hope. And I think it's a ray of hope that as Dominicans we have to cling to. As Dominicans we have to hang on to. Because what the CCJ decision offers is an opportunity for us once and for all to take our country back. Once and for all to tell this government of Dominica that we're not happy with the way the country has been run, that after 20 years, they're clearly out of any type of solution that is beneficial to the people of Dominica, that the country continues to sink deeper and deeper into poverty, neglect, violence, and really we can do better. And I think it's a wake-up call for us. And you said Dominica is at the crossroads. We often refer to this as a tipping point. That is the point where the country can go either way. We've reached this point. We've reached this point because of the inability, largely, of this government to be able to deal in any manner, in any significant manner, with the social issues I talked about, the political issues, the economic issues that continue to confront us. And so it's a great time for us to begin to reflect on this. I've highlighted some of the issues. We'll talk about some of the solutions going forward. But the Dominican people must be concerned. They should be concerned. I wish I could just, in a way, just shake people up right now. Just wake them up. Say, hey, you're sleeping. Let's not go to sleep. Dominica is at a crossroads. It's at a tipping point, and we need to do everything that we can in our power to reverse that trend. And so we'll talk about solutions. This was just an outline of some of the issues, I believe, Mr. G, that we have in Dominica and some of the concerns that we must begin to address as a people. Thank you.
Well, yes, and thank you for that sort of overview. Dr. Thomson Fontaine. And I know that Dr. Andre is going to take it from there, because I mean, now that you've set this background, this big picture, you've sort of positioned us into where we are, why we are where we are now, and the fact that the CCJ has given us this, open up this little window, this ray of hope that we can fix our electoral process, so that we can have free and fair elections, so that we can bring back good governance, so that we can use that good governance to fix the social problems that we have, these problems of crime and violence, this problem of management of the economy, to put our economic thing in place so that our young people can feel they have a brighter future. So now everybody's just not just looking to migrate to get a US visa and go somewhere. Dr. Andre, maybe you can help us to look at some of those issues there, and particularly what the CCJ, what is really the meaning of this thing that the CCJ did. I mean, how do we really interpret the depth? What's the real meaning of the impact of that CCJ ruling?
Well, to be quite honest with you, you don't have to be a lawyer or someone with a so-called legal mind to understand the import of the CCJ's decision. Simply put, the CCJ has articulated a view espoused by thousands of Dominicans and non-Dominicans that there is something rotten in the state of Denmark. The CCJ has exposed it with its legitimacy and with its concern and scrupulous anxiety for the rule of law, to indicate that the elections of Dominica are tainted. And that is a very significant message, because we've had the international NGOs dithering about the legitimacy of those elections. We've had them give conflicting views. And many of us suspected for a long time, but that many of those views which sought to legitimize the elections were embraced by persons who were somewhat beholden to the political directorate. The CCJ is not beholden to the political directorate. This judicial decision speaks volumes about judicial independence. Now, let me give you a little background to this decision. You may remember when these 10 petitions were filed. You may remember the jockeying in terms of which judge will handle this matter. You may remember that the opposition launched legitimate concerns about a local judge hearing this thing. But most significantly and most egregiously, the Attorney General wrote to the Chief Justice of the OECS Court, asking her, for God's sakes, not to allow the other local judge to hear this case. Now, the Court of Appeal Justice should have told the Attorney General, your head not good. You as a political operative, you cannot involve yourself in judicial decision making. You cannot recommend which judge would hear this case. You are out of line. Who do you think you are? But what happened? The Court of Appeal Justice, the chief, she folded like a pancake. She meekly surrendered every indication and value relating to judicial independence, and she basically agreed that the other local judge should not hear the case. And it is within that context you've had ultimately that this judge, Glasgow J, was parachuted into the jurisdiction, much to the delight, I should say, of the Attorney General. Now, this is an Attorney General who should recognize and understand those rules of non-engagement in the judicial process. This is an Attorney General who should understand that he has no business writing to the Chief Justice of the Court of Appeal, expressing unhappiness about the other local judge. The way that matter should have been handled properly is that the trial judge, an application should have been brought before the local trial judge asking her to recuse herself for reasons A, B, and C. But to write to the Chief Justice of the Court of Appeal, expressing those concerns and inviting her to replace or not to allow that other local judge to hear this case, is an abomination. It trespasses in the most terrible fashion the fundamental principles of judicial independence. So this case started off on a bad footing. But let me give you another example to illustrate how things are working in this place. Once upon a time, there was an economist who was charged with inciting. He went to Sudan to work. He came back. He was held for a bail hearing. And listen carefully, because that will not happen in any other island. It was reported that during that bail hearing, on 6 separate occasions, probably I'm wrong, make it 4, he took a recess and he was seen outside of the court on his phone. And if the reports from Mass in the seminary is correct, then he was speaking to a government minister during the time that he's conducting a bail hearing, for God's sakes. And it is reported, and I cannot vouch for it, but it was reported by the Dominica Mass in the cemetery, that he was told unequivocally, we can get another magistrate from Trinidad to do what we want you to do if you decide not to do it. So even if I can't confirm the contents of the conversation, but the mere fact that during a judicial hearing, you have the hearing judicial officer speaking to someone during the hearing of that case is a judicial abomination. And there's no cry. Where is the bar? We're not talking about a bar of soap, Mr. Gregoire. We're talking about the legal bar. What opinion did they express about that? What opinion did they express about the attack on the CCJ by the Attorney General, who is asking the CCJ to explain or clarify their quote-unquote gratuitous comments? Where did he get that authority? Where did he get in local parlance that freshness to ask the CCJ to clarify anything? If he needs clarification, bring an independent case before the CCJ. Bring it about elections. Bring it about the legitimacy of elections. But the CCJ was well within the purview of its mandate to have delivered the scathing indictment that it did. It made it clear that on the narrow issue of jurisdiction, it upheld the Court of Appeal. Now, there is an argument to be made that the CCJ was wrong in doing so, because the crux of the CCJ's decision was that there was no final decision by the judge for the purposes of Section 40, subsection 6 and 40, subsection 7 of the Constitution. That may be the case, but the decision of the judge to strike out was in fact a final decision because it buried the election petitions brought by the petitioners. It chucked it into a coffin and buried it 6 feet under the ground. What more final decision can you have than a decision to summarily chuck election petitions? And in so doing, as the CCJ recognized, you deprived the petitioners from exercising their constitutional right to challenge the validity of an election. And as the CCJ said in admonishing Glasgow J, he said that that kind of action should very sparingly made because of the impact on the imperatives of a free and fair election. But the CCJ went on further. It said, in conclusion, these appeals have been dismissed on the basis of want of jurisdiction because there was no final decision or order made by the judge for the purposes of 40 subsection 6 and 40 subsection 7. But listen to the caveat. Listen to the admonishment of the CCJ. However, quote, there remain areas of grave concern about how the process of these elections was conducted. Future elections in Dominica ought not to proceed with these or similar taints. And you remember, there was an operative who basically said, we've been conducting elections like that for decades. No, there's nothing wrong, Gasso. There is nothing wrong. But of course there's everything wrong, because there was a patent violation of many of Dominica's electoral laws insofar as free and fair elections are concerned. So the CCJ went beyond the boundary, to use a cricketing metaphor from C.L.R. James. They did what many of their lower court counterparts did not dare to do. They called a spade a spade. They made a decision based on the whole picture, not on the narrow legalistic question as to whether, in fact, the decision of Glasgow was a final decision or an intermediate decision. They looked at the real picture. They looked at the overarching issue. And the overarching issue was simply the nature and the integrity of Dominica's elections. But although the CCJ did not fully, in my respectful view, deliver a victory in terms of the merits of the case, but at least it made it clear to the region. It made it clear to those who are monitoring decisions from the ultimate court that there is something which is very untoward, unfair, unjust, unlawful about Dominica's elections. So the folk can run, but they can't hide. So the Attorney General can come up with every gratuitous request to the CCJ about, quote unquote, clarifying your position. If you have to depend on a jurist, a legal officer, in terms of clarity, who would you be depend on? The judges in the CCJ or Dominica's Attorney General? You tell me, whose opinion would you value more? You tell us. Has the CCJ, has the Attorney General expressed one single critique of the patent violation of Dominica's electoral laws? Just one. He's never done so because he's long abdicated his responsibility as an Attorney General, the lawyer for the people, not for the narrow political interests that he now serves. So the whole thing has become a gross embarrassment. And it is within that context you legitimately have to ask, what is his name? Lord Byron? Byron? Where is he going? Or should I ask, where is he coming? Or where is he coming from? Why have we not seen that noted report and the proposed legislation? What is it? What is within it? How does it serve or further free and fair elections in Dominica? Is it or will it recognize the defects or the problems we've had with elections in Dominica? Will it talk about campaign finance reform? Will it talk about Dominicans abroad who've lived 10, 20, 30 years abroad can just come in to vote? Will it talk about the unchecked infusion of money in Dominica's elections? Will it talk about any of these things? And if he does, is the political directorate prepared to adhere to those recommendations of Lord Byron? Or will his report receive the same fate by being chucked under the mattress, just as the same Prime Minister of Barbados, quite frankly, who is also turning a blind eye to what's happening in Dominica, just as her report was chucked years ago? And the ultimate question is, who will guard Dominica's free and fair election regime? The CCJ? They can't. The police? Oh, Jesus Christ. The political directorate? Lord have mercy. Who? The enablers? Abide with me, fast falls the evening tide. The ultimate arbiter, the ultimate protector will be the people of Dominica. Because quite frankly, the CCJ has made it clear that you are doomed to oblivion if you continue with that unpleasant state of affairs that we call general elections every 4 or 5 years. And that is where we're at. What are our people willing to do to protect the integrity of their elections? On that note, I take my leave, temporarily, that is.
I would say very temporarily, because I want you to address one other matter before I let you go. We have to go back to the beginning of this, Dr. Andre, I believe you will recall, with all its problems, the Electoral Commission did try to do something to see if they could give us free and fair elections. They started a process of cleaning the voters list. They started trying, I don't want you to laugh at me, when I'm
No.
doing my thing. But you know, there was this famous little email that said, "Oh God, there's madness going on down there at the Electoral Commission. They want to clean voters list and re-register people and so on. You have to you have to do something about that." I wanted to address that really because this is probably what brought us to where we are today. Why the CCJ now has to intervene, and people now want to, the same people want to now come and criticize the CCG for telling them you were wrong to interfere in the process of getting free and fair elections in Dominica.
Well, let me indicate one thing. I mean, you said that this is what started the whole process. I beg to differ. And if you want to cast me by the wayside or send me to speak on DBS, that's fine. They have a good show right now, Snow White and the Two Manacles. That's fine. But let me say this. The genesis of all this macaque that's going on is the insatiable appetite for some members of the political directorate to hold on to power and to garner all the financial benefits, all the ill-gotten gains from illicitly holding on to power. That is the ultimate reason why we have this nonsense, you know. I mean, this fellow, Tony Astafan, could have said what he wanted in an email, you know. But if you had another leader like LeBlanc or James or even John or even Pierre Charles, they would say, Gaston, I'm not in this thing. I am not there to win at all costs. I am not going to sit on the backs of people just to remain in power. As LeBlanc said, I have only one back. I don't need any fake Gucci shirt and 12 others. I just want a house. I want to take care of my family. I want to give my people as much as I can. That is the extent of his involvement in the political process. When I interviewed, he said, I was only doing my duty. So if you had that type of overarching mentality, we would not be in the situation where we are, where you have 4 SUVs, 12 or 16 bodyguards. But don't ask me who they're guarding, because there's a little dog on Queen Mary Street some time ago who stole a piece of back and neck from somebody. Don't ask me that is the type of guarding that they want to do, to be quite frank with you. You know, if you had someone who had this manifested, this clinical disinterest in acquisition wealth on the backs of the people, we would not have had those problems. LeBlanc would have told his legal directors, go fly a kite. I am not that type of despotic person. I don't have that type of despotic bone in any part of my body. I have no interest in these things. My interest is those values, writing poetry, taking care of my people, giving scholarships to indigent children, whether in Newtown, whether in Vacaz, or anywhere else. So that is where I differ with you. That is what has put us in this hole, the question of leadership, the question of what is your vision with respect to leadership, the question as to what you want out of being the prime minister or the leader of Dominica. Do you want to improve the welfare and well-being of your people? Or do you want, quite frankly, to boast that I buy my insurance and you cannot buy insurance? And look into Irving Andrews saying, he. Or you remember that sucker from La Plaine who was beaten by a minister? And then he went on a stand and he said, Gasson, beat me more. Give me a house, but you can beat me more. Where is the innate dignity of your people? Where is that sense of responsibility? Where is that pride? Where is that manly pride of providing for your family? Of being able to say, here is the fruits of my labor. Here is my exemplification of the biblical parables of the sower. I sowed on fertile soil, and I'm reaping the harvest of my hard labor. Where is that mentality? Huh? Is the mentality now one of trying to gain an apartment, destroying your way of life? Not even having a proper sewage where you live? Is that your aspiration? Is that what you want for yourself? Is that how we can build Dominica? So trust me, unless that mentality, whether in leadership or among our folks, is reversed, then we will remain, unfortunately, in the same boat. But there is always hope. look at your panelists today. There is always hope. And I certainly am hopeful that this paradigm will be shifted and there will be a change, but please don't ask me when. Thank you very much.
Dr. Andre, you differed with me, but who am I to differ with you?
You are the owner of the station. You're right.
Well, that is,
Sorry. I forgot.
I have absolutely, I absolutely no disagreement. Anything you've said. As a matter of fact, I agree with everything that you've said. I mean, this thing is really becoming a joke now, you know. I mean, when we talk about Dominican, I'm going to go to Simeon Josie because I feel now I must go to him. Because, Dr. Andre, when we think about our people, the way we used to be deprived, we used to want to work hard. We used to talk about kudme and self-help and so on. All of a sudden, everybody want to be quiet and waiting for a little handout. What's going on? I mean, you have interviewed so many of our leaders in the past. You've never seen that kind of thing happening under any of their regimes. We've never seen that before. What has happened to us? Why are we accepting this? You know, Dr. Simeon Joseph, maybe you can help us out with some of that because you know, Simeon, yes, you're the younger generation. You can see what the youth is going through. I mean, somebody had a little video they put out and they said, listen, Dominica is a paradise. Things are good. The youth are under control. They have it made, they have it under control. Airport is being built. All kinds of schools and hospitals, all kinds of things built. People are being employed. All kinds of things are happening. Simeon, you are in touch with the youth. You're on the ground. You know what is happening. Help us with some of that and then position some of that for us. What is causing this problem and what are we going to do about it?
Well, you see, good evening again, everyone. Dr. Andre, you know, thanks for such a sterling introduction. Mr. Gregoire, you gave me an extended form of flattery there by calling me youth, you know.
That's okay.
But you know, coming on the heels of Dr. Andre as a judge, okay, I would say what he gave us, you know, in every trial, there's a summation to the jury, okay? And Dr. Andre did a good job of that. So all I can say after Dr. Andre has spoken is to speak on behalf of an individual jury and to say one word: indictment. Indictment. Because you see, I listened very carefully to your introduction to the program tonight. And after listening to all of that, but also exploring very closely what is happening in Dominica today, there are two things that you mentioned. The first one you mentioned is the good, the bad, and the ugly. We remember the days when Dominica was good. Politically, socially, culturally, religiously, we remember the days when Dominica was good. And it seems as though that current leadership and governance of this country have transitioned us not only into the bad, but into the ugly. Because what is happening in Dominica today certainly cannot be considered as good or even bad. Because you see, when things are bad, it is sort of you are in an area where you can pivot to the good or to something better. But I think we have reached a state of ugliness in Dominica based on the things that are happening. That's the first one. The second sentence that you drew from is from the Bible. When you ask the question, what does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? But when you ask that question, one thing came to mind, a connecting verse in the Bible, which brings me back to your first statement of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it is this: the thief comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. Think of those two things. The thief comes to kill, to steal, and to destroy. And the fact is, we have to look very closely in Dominica today and see we are almost a lifeless society. But the very essence of the Dominican livelihood has been snuffed out from every aspect of our society. where and Dr. Andre and Thomson spoke about it to some extent when we talk about the rich and the poor. Because one of the things I realize is that one of the things that are dead in Dominica is something called the middle class. When you know that the middle class were the engines of spending and growth in any society, and in Dominica, we don't seem to have them anymore. Now, it is telling that when you look at places like Mont Daniel, Canefield, Roger, Belfast, Castle Comfort, Wall House, Fontaine, who built those places? Our teachers, our nurses, our policemen, our civil servants, and our public servants, our firemen. And these people were empowered on their own to independently use their salaries, go to our financial institutions, and were able to build houses for themselves and expand. Because many of these people didn't come from any well-to-do. We know many of these people were country folk. We know many of these people in their school days would have come from Pottersville and maybe even Tarish Pit and a few lower places society. Look at and Goodwill. And these people were able to transition through their hard work and their savings and the ability to go into our financial institutions, take a loan, and build a house, thereby developing the urban sector around Roseville. That's middle class. These were the people who allowed things like the National Bank and the credit unions to grow. And they were able to go into the banks, the aid bank, because I remember working in the aid bank, and take loans on their public servant salaries to send their children to study, thereby giving Dominica its first set of what you call lawyers and doctors and engineers from the ordinary folk. And so we had a rise of the middle class in Dominica. Today that does not exist because our policemen, our teachers, our nurses, our firemen, and our public servants can hardly make ends meet. Public servants today do not have the wherewithal to go to the banks and get financial income to sustain themselves and their families, to the extent that many of them have become beggars, and beggars to such an extent that they are not even independent enough as public servants to function within government with an independent mind and spirit and sustain good governance. That is something. So when you think of that, you look at, there is a death. The kill part, that is it. So the public, the middle class has been killed. And to steal, where the stealing part, we cannot downplay the level of corruption that has permeated, and you could almost say saturated every sector of our society. Our public service is corrupt, our politicians are corrupt, our police force is corrupt, the legal system is corrupt, our medical profession is corrupt. And what is becoming frighteningly so is that the average person in Dominica is now taking it for granted that corruption is the order of the day. It is accepted. It is given a place of prominence that for you to survive, you have to be part of being corrupt. So we have this thing of stealing, and not only that, so and then the destruction of the very soul and the very fabric of our society. And I think that is what bothers me the most, because when we talk about our young people and the legacy of what we're going to leave behind, we have to be very concerned that the soul of Dominica has been destroyed. And when I speak about the soul of Dominica, I speak about that united spiritual consciousness, that energy, that common language that connects our people. Those people, those of us who live in Dominica and in the diaspora, to live and to exist and to participate in and with others, because we have become very selfish and isolated. Okay, and those of us who share this country would share in the element of desire to maintain a connection to Dominica. And I say that shiveringly because 8 or 9 out of 10 people you meet in Dominica today want to leave and never come back. They are losing their connectivity to their country and to their roots. And that is very frightening, Because it means, therefore, our future, the soul of our country, is being undermined because we are losing that connectivity, that interconnectedness, that spirit that brings us together as a people for the advancements of a country. And not only that, the erosion of our culture that needs to be embedded in a vitality and a creativity and a cohesiveness in our culture. Even that too is being undermined, because you speak to many people and they don't even know what it is to be Dominican. There are Dominicans today who are ashamed of being Dominicans, and this is very sad. It's very sad. And we have to look at the other erosion when we talk about the destruction of Dominica today, the destruction of that intrinsic value in all of us that provides for our social and economic benefit with improved learning and health care. When we look at the situation of our hospital, Dominica once boasted of having the best healthcare system in the Caribbean. We exported our health system to places like Africa and Central America and the rest of the Caribbean, okay? Where primary health care was something, a model, where the Marigot Hospital and the Portsmouth Hospital and the Granby and the Lapland Hospital heavily supported the Princess Margaret Hospital. Today, our main hospital and our health centers are devoid of that kind of primary health care that is able to guarantee and ensure proper health for our citizens. Okay, and so all of these are things I think we need to focus on. Now, a lot has been shared tonight about all of this, but we need to explore other dimensions, because we haven't just come here like that. This killing of the dream of the aspiring Dominican, okay, and the stealing of our resources and the destruction of the soul of our country must lead us to explore other dimensions. And the other dimensions we need to explore are things like the integrity of our government and governance. The integrity of our government and governance, and more specifically, our public administration. Because I remember the days, you see, when people like E.O. Libla or Patrick John or Eugenia Charles or Edison James would attempt to deviate from public order, and cabinet secretaries and permanent secretaries would put a stop to it and tell them, listen, Mr. Minister, Mr. Prime Minister, this is not the way to go. And so these custodians of our public administration insisted and maintained that the political directorate does not determine and dictate for the rest of the public and for the rest of us how the country should go, because these people held together the Constitution, the laws of the land, the Public Service Act, and the legal processes to ensure that the political directorate was guided by and followed the systems. So it's not only enough to talk about government and governance, we must look at public administration and to examine the lack of safety and security and the undermining of it to some extent. So we have to look for there is a need for greater integrity and accountability in governance in Dominica and government. Now, we have to look as well as how is the interest of our populace and our population, or the polis, because in politics comes from the word polis, meaning people. How is that safeguarded? How has politics undermined the safety and security of Dominicans and the undermining of social stability? And I look at the three arms of government as a means of critique and thought: the executive, judiciary, and the legislature. The three pillars upon which democracy, good governance, and public accountability stands. And I'm going to say very, 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 very frankly tonight that we almost have a dissolution of that administrative framework and structure for good governance in the country. We look at our presidency. The presidency has been virtually compromised, if at all we have a presidency in Dominica. When one examines the roles and the responsibilities and the duties of the president as the custodian, so to speak, of our constitution, we could say the presidency has been virtually compromised. and lacking the level of independence that people like Clancy Signoret and Vernon Shaw and these people had. And when you speak to former prime ministers, they will tell you that Louis Couz-Lartigue and Clancy Signoret and Aurelius Marie and Jenna Armour and Mr. Signoret and Vernon Shaw were able to be the safeguard of the Constitution by advising our prime ministers when they were going astray. And the prime ministers can testify to that in their accounts. And let us not even talk about the judiciary. The undermining of confidence in the judiciary and the rule of law and the judicial process. And the large number of allegations of corruption by people of the legal system. And a number of our lawyers who have been compromised. Justice Andre spoke enough about that for us to know. And we know that. Speak to any of the young men in particular have done who have been arrested or even convicted of crime, and they will openly confess to you the complicity of their lawyers and policemen and people in the judicial system as to how to escape justice. And they will openly say that. And they will remind you and tell you of their friends in high places and influential positions. They will tell you that, and that has been compromised. And of course, we cannot avoid looking at our legislature, which I consider now to be an animal farm. As a young man growing up from primary school through secondary school to college, one of my greatest pastimes was to listen to the House of Assembly, to spend some time listening to the great debates in the House of Assembly and the orations of people in the House of Assembly, from Mr. Moise, okay, to Eugenia Charles, to Patrick John, to Vic Rivera, okay, to people like Mike Douglas and Rosie Douglas and all of these people, and to listen to and to observe the presidency of the speakers of the House of Assembly, Mary Davis Spear, Eustace Francis, Neva Edwards, okay, Crispin Sorrento, to what we have come today. Nothing more than an animal farm, with people expressing great disrespect and open disgust of fellow legislators in the House of Assembly. That going unabated. And so we have to look at that in all these perspectives. And I would dare say, as an opening statement in all of this, as a warning, that when one considers the definition of fascism, when one considers the definition of fascism as a system headed by a dictator in which the government controls the business and labor and opposition is not permitted. When one examines the ideology of fascism, which typically centers around extreme nationalism and opposition to democracy and liberalism, in practice, fascism revolves around a ruler who uses absolute power to suppress the individual freedom of citizens, making everyone completely subject to the power of the state. And when one considers the common things among fascist movements, which include nationalism, hierarchy, elitism, militarism, masculinity, and quasi-religion, and other aspects of fascism, such as the myth of decadence, anti-egalitarianism, and totalitarianism, we have to ask ourselves a question. Where is Dominica headed? In closing, I'd like to say that as a child of the 70s, when we look at the demise of Leo Austin as perhaps those whom people described as the most misguided Attorney General of Dominica, every time I think of 1979 and I see what is happening today, unfortunately, I have to convince myself that 1979 was a smokescreen by those in power today who tolerate more egregious situations in today's governance than ever happened in 1979. Because had Leo Austin taken a position that the current Attorney General had taken under the guise of Charles Savarin, our current president, and many of the people in Dominica today We have to keep those things into balance, and that should tell us something. So if Leo Austin is the appraisal of Leo Austin, is the benchmark upon which we measure an attorney general, it should tell us that the current attorney general we have today falls far below even the meanest or the slightest of qualifications to be called an attorney general.
And thank you for that, Simeon Joseph. I'm going to move to Dr. Dion George momentarily, but I want to go back to you, Dr. Andre, for 1 minute, because you have to comment on some of the last things that Simeon Joseph mentioned. He mentioned the whole question of good governance and integrity and accountability and transparency and free and fair elections, but he also mentioned that word fascism. And then he spoke about the demise of Leo Austin, and he compared to 79 to what people are tolerating today. I need a comment from you on those.
Well, he's certainly right that when you objectively think of what is transpiring today, and when you juxtapose that with what happened in the late 70s, you could see what happened in the 70s was a tea party, really, in terms of officials, in terms of alleged corruption and so on. Everything that happened in the 70s pales in comparison to what transpires today. Let me give an instance. On about 1978, Brian Alleyne, Sir Brian, and I think Mary Jr., they challenged a member of the Electoral Commission for failing to register someone to vote in a constituency where that person had the right to vote. Listen carefully. They were able to bring a private prosecution against that person. Undeterred by the state, they prosecuted that case and they secured a conviction of that Electoral Commission. Let me pose a question. Do you, in your right mind, think that can happen today? It can't. The case would be nolly prost. In fact, in the 70s, they would have called it nolly prat, the name of a brandy. They would have poured brandy over that case and kill it there and then. That is just one example that comes to mind. Let's put it that way. Remember the champions of democracy, those who raised the flag as if they were crusaders fighting the next religious war for the heart and soul of Dominicans. Where are they now? Saki Feyo. I can't remember the names, but where are they now? What cause are they serving? Are they serving any other cause but their own? So yes, Simeon is right. We have to juxtapose the positions we took in the 70s. We have to juxtapose our indignation about wrongdoing, and we have to look at it in light of what's happening right now. And then we can get a true appreciation as to the extent to which we've fallen down. Some of those soldiers of conscience, one of them died a few months ago, poor fellow, probably stricken by guilt. There are others who were, how did Al Jazeera put it again? I forgot, Mr. G. I think you made reference to it. Oh, thank you, Highness. I thought it was Manicos, but it's Highness. That is what we are dealing with today. And why that is why there is a much fiercer urgency of now, to use Martin Luther King's analogy, to correct the ship of state. Simeon is right. Look at law enforcement, for God's sakes. Look at what's happening. Remember Leo Emanuel? You remember there was someone who confessed to committing that crime of arson? In criminal law enforcement, a confession is what every conscientious police officer looks for. These folks are being given a confession on a platter. Just Jordi, they have not done anything. You have a few weeks ago, young fellas discharging firearms in Roseau. Dominica is so big that the law enforcement officers, they know nothing as to the identity of those who did this thing. In my jurisdiction, each of them would have faced at least 8 different charges. The police didn't even charge their battery. And that is what we are facing today. And as Bob Marley said, when the rain falls, it doesn't fall only on somebody's house.
Dr. Andre, thank you for that little interjection there. Appreciate that. But Dr. Dion George, and then we're going to go back to Dr. Thomson Fontaine after you. But Dr. Dion George, I believe the CCJ has given us a little ray of light, a little window of hope there to deal with some of the issues and to correct that ship of, as Dr. Andre is saying, to put it on the right keel, put it back on track. It caused us now to go and look serious. All of us Dominicans, I don't care which political party you support, we're all Dominicans, for God's sake. No matter where we are in any community in Dominica, in New York or in Paris, wherever we are all Dominicans. We love our country. We want our people to be united again. We want to go back to the days of hope and dignity and honor when we worked hard and depending on our hard work to get what we wanted. And, to be, as Simeon said, to go and face a bank and say, look, I'm able to take a loan and see about my own thing. Like the farmers used to just go and buy their property and buy their vehicles and so on because of their hard work. Dr. Dion George, I wanted you to address some of that because, as I said, the CCJ has given us that opportunity. Look at the whole question of the state of our governance, the state of our integrity, accountability, transparency. Why is it? Is it because we have not been having free and fair elections that we've had one regime in there forever, and the same all is happening every time? And is the CCJ saying, fellas, all you need to correct that? Don't stop doing this thing. You can't keep on doing this thing. It's not going anywhere. You have to correct it. And Simeon mentioned the question of fascism, a regime controlling the business and the labor, and all of the fancy words he used. You fellow, you're more familiar. You teach those things at school. So what I'm saying is this: give us a little bit of your wisdom there, because we've dealt with this thing before about free and fair elections. We've dealt with some of the recommendations made by the people to get free and fair elections so that we can have good governance. We looked at the recommendations for residency requirement as a pivotal thing. We looked at the recommendations for campaign finance reform so that we don't get big money just coming in and buying over our government and buying our elections. Let me go to you now, Dr. Dion George, to help us out. Put those things in context because we are still looking at the recommendations made by the CCJ. Where do we go from there, Dominica?
Thank you, and good evening to the panelists. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking the time to come out. I know everyone here has things to do, but you're giving service to country, and I thank you. And Mr. Gregoire, thank you for inviting me as well. Good evening to the listeners at home and abroad. And I always want to welcome the Holy Spirit in these discussions because I think God is the Alpha and the Omega of all wisdom. And so thank you again. But tonight, I believe the topic is Dominica at the Crossroads and the need for new directions for better socio-economic and cultural development. And I guess my contribution tonight, I will focus on the significance of the CCJ decision. But much has been said about it. Of course, Dr. Andre did a cursory review, very in-depth, very comprehensive. And so I will give my tweak to that topic. But I will also comment on campaign finance reform, particularly because of the decisions that hailed from the CCJ decision regarding elections in Dominica. And so I will speak a little bit about that. And then finally, I just want to touch on the whole idea of human rights, and crime, and violence in Dominica, and the responsibility of government. And so, firstly, when it comes to the CCJ, of course, there have been several shows in Dominica that have dealt with that issue. And of course, Dr. Andre has been very in-depth in his analysis as a judge and his profession. Where he noted very clearly that perhaps it may not be a victory for the opposition forces, but undoubtedly the war is not over, and clearly the writings are on the wall that the appellate court, the court of appellate jurisdiction, is saying that there are some serious concerns in Dominica. Now, what I will focus on is the response of the government of Dominica, and I would invite the listeners to lend me an ear because the government of Dominica did respond, and I think, in my own words, I would describe it to be something as in invidious or almost perilous, something that could trigger anger, something that could cause some serious concern. And I say that because it seems to me, based on the response of the government, and for those who have not read it, I would encourage you to do so at your own time. But basically, the government responded back to the CCJ and told them that they're disappointed with their decision, and they had the audacity to say to the CCJ that the Dominican public, I don't want to use the word naive, but they use a word that is comparable to naive, that they are not politically savvy, something of that point, and that the opposition is using the rationalization of that decision as political gain. And so with that being said, I thought to myself, it would be interesting to share as a civic duty to the public listening the responsibility of an appellate court. And of course, Dr. Andre, and if Gabriel was there, and all the other panelists can tell you original jurisdiction and appellate jurisdiction. And when one briefs a case, like which most lawyers do, they brief a case, they would say it's the litigant versus the defendant. Of course, they would give you the facts of the case. They would quote the part of the Constitution that the case relates to. And then they would give you a decision. Now, in a court of original jurisdiction, typically it's guilty or not guilty. In a court of appellate jurisdiction, sometimes they upheld the lower court decision, sometimes they reverse the lower court decision, and sometimes they remand it. But interestingly, when a court of appellate jurisdiction gives a ruling, there is something which is called the legal reasoning. It's called the legal rule, where they give an explanation for their decision. Now, this is very interesting. Sometimes the decision that they give might go against some of the rationalization that they give. But you better believe me that when a court gives a decision and it gives a ruling, it gives what is called a legal reasoning for its explanation, is because it realized certain things that need to be addressed. And so I thought the CCJ gave a very direct message to the political electorate of Dominica, that they said that certain things should not repeat itself and that certain things need to be straightened up. What I found was more interesting was the response. And so I said to myself, there's no way that could be a legal response. That had to be political. And so the question becomes, why would the government of Dominica respond to the CCJ in such quick time with such disgust? And I said to myself, there must be some implications coming with that. So what needs to happen? Well, Mr. Gregoire and the listening panel, we have for the longest time been appealing and protesting for electoral reform. So much so, we talked about campaign finance reform. I remember quite vividly, in not a parochial way, but in a very deep way, that the Attorney General was on this program with you, discussing this very issue of electoral reform. And it was a very heated debate, and I thought it ended well. I thought it yielded some sort of utility. But one of the concerns that he had, which I brought to his attention, was campaign finance reform. And he said to me, I remember very clearly, he says, I have not seen a model that can work. And if you have one, let me know about it. So forth. And so essentially, he recognized the need for cleaning up the voters list, the re-registration, etc., which the other CARICOM and the other election observers recommended to Dominica. But when it comes to campaign finance reform, he was very clear. He says, I have not seen one. If you have one, show it to me. Well, I will say, and I did say that night as well, that Jamaica has a model. And of course, I don't want to be repetitive, but we know that the model is working. Two aspects of the model, I think, is important. One, that they create safeguards for someone who contends the election. You know, this whole thing in the Caribbean, or particularly Dominica, for example, if you run and you do not win a certain percentage, they say you lost your deposit, and then they say you could never get a job again. Well, what the Jamaican model is doing, they're saying no, that if someone has offered themselves for public service and they did not win the election, they ought not be penalized for participating in the election. I think that's a good thing. Another thing that one can consider is the whole idea that people elect officials to represent them, not money. I say that because there is this whole idea that there are some campaigns in the Caribbean where there is a fresh load of monies being poured in, which is unfair. Even the CARICOM report and some of the other reports says that election in Dominica, it might be free, but it's not fair. Not being fair means, do you have a balanced playing field? Is one side has an advantage over the other side? Do they get same time on the national radio? My dear friends, if you're listening to me, even in the United States, that was a huge concern. With a Supreme Court case, you could note it down. It's called Citizens United versus the FEC, the Federal Election Commission. And this is a case that had to do with Hillary Clinton, where a ultra-conservative group criticized her terribly. And then she basically tried to say that this was harassing her. But the point of the issue was campaign finance reform. What the Supreme Court ruled, and it will apply to Dominica, is this. They said, you cannot tell anybody how much money to put in a campaign. Now, keep in mind, this is a very conservative Supreme Court bench. And they are saying now that one can give as much money as possible to a campaign. Obviously, there were persons, very technocrats, and of course, persons on the Democratic Party like Barack Obama, who was very disappointed. Why? They are saying, and consider this, they are saying, if, for example, a foreign entity, say, for example, Russia, or a foreign bank, or put it in Dominica case, these folks who have all the contracts in Dominica, if they can funnel enough money for one party, what chance the other party has? So who is going to win the election? I mean, they could buy an election. They could literally give everybody $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000. What it takes to win, they can give. Now, for the US, what Barack Obama and them were arguing is that, what if Russia don't have the best interest of the United States? But say they're getting so much money from natural gas, they support a candidate because they want the worst. And so we have to think that, does campaign finance reform make sense? That is, should we have limits on how much a party can receive? Number one. Should we have full disclosure of where these donations are coming from? Number two. And so these are very salient points that need to be dealt with. And I think the Supreme Court, well, the CCG of the Caribbean is saying that there is some things in Dominica that need to fix. I will stop on that point. The other point I want to mention, which I think is something that all of us can touch on, is the crime and violence. It's very sad. I plan to travel to Dominica recently, and I'm uncomfortable because when I grew up in Dominica, I never saw all these murders. Once in a blue, you would hear of some guys having a fight, and so forth. Now I'm hearing about gunshots almost every month, twice a month, 3 times in a month. And the question that comes to me as we're having discussed, and the idea here is not to criticize, but to analyze. The idea here is to figure out what is the role of government, and do they have a role? And I will share with you undeniably, yes. If you look at any political philosopher, whether it's Plato, whether it's Karl Marx, whether it's John Locke, they would tell you that the role of government, one, is to provide for the welfare of the people and for the security of the people. So whether it's hurricane, whether it's war, that the role of government is to provide for the welfare and for the security of the people. And so even in the United States, for example, if there is a series of gun violence, you hear the president comes out and he said, this is a problem and Congress has to do something. You see people protest and say, my God, this has to be dealt with. And so I was happy today to hear the Minister of Security made a mention that he would address it. And that's a positive thing. But I said to myself, the leader of the country too, including the president, has to deal with that. You know, there is something in New York one time they call war on guns and war on drugs, where that officials decided that this is a problem, whatever the cause of the problem. Now, we can talk about causes of problem. I'm very sure that the sociologists right here on this panel can tell you about causes and consequences of crimes. But we are dealing right now with the solutions. And so the question is there a task force that can say this is too much? Are we going to take this as a priority? And so, Mr. Gregoire, with those opening remarks, I would like to tell you that we are open here in this evening for discussion that I think we don't want to just criticize, but we want to bring in some element of a rationalization of the issue, and is there possible solutions that we can discuss, and perhaps those beholding can make decisions toward that effect.
And thank you, Dr. George. Now, Lambi, I'm going to go over to Dr. Thomson Fontaine, but I want to let you know that we're just going to open up the discussion so that all of us can jump in at any time and talk about things, you know, as I started with Dr. Thomson Fontaine. But Lambi, please, if you have calls coming in, I mean, if you'd like to give out the numbers now, and then once you have the calls coming, we're going to take the calls because we want the public to weigh in and give us their opinion. So give them the numbers, and then if you don't have a call, you'll come back to me, and then I'll go to Dr. Fontaine. And while Lambi is doing that, let me also say that I will come back a bit later to acknowledge all the people who are with us on Facebook, because quite a few people are with us on Facebook. I will want to acknowledge them in some of the comments. I know Dr. Thomson Fontaine might be following some of what he's seeing there, so maybe he can help me to acknowledge some of the folks on Facebook as well. Okay, Lambi, over to you.
Good evening, gentlemen. Good evening, Dominica. The numbers to access this program is 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257, 305-432-9624. And we do have a call on the line already, so let's give the call the opportunity. Caller, please go ahead.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, the Minister of National Security, when he comes talking about guns and so on, wasn't he in office when on an election day in Dominica, they brought in people with guns to shoot Dominicans? These people are a bunch of hypocrites. When you're going to bring in people on an election day to shoot people, and now you're talking about guns. Tell these people, stop being hypocrites. Thank you.
Thanks, caller. Appreciate it.
Yes, as the calls come, you will just interrupt. It'll just make me a sign, Lambi. We'll take the calls, all right? Dr. Thomson Fontaine, you know, I've listened to all of that tonight. And as I said, we're going to all feel free to jump in. Dr. Andre, Simeon, Dion, anytime. Jump in as we have the discussion going. We'll make it an open, interactive discussion now. We'll take the calls. But we heard all this, the need to bring back good governance. They need to bring back integrity, to bring back transparency and accountability, proper administration, where the PSs and so on will take control of the administration and make sure guide the political directorate so that the politics does not subvert everything. You want to take a call now, Lambi? Let's take it.
Yes. Caller, please go ahead.
Yeah, Lambi, good evening and good evening to all the panelists. I just have a short comment and a question. I'll start with the question first, and it's to Mr. George or Dr. George. As a learned political scientist, I would like you to elaborate more on the response of the government. You started, but I didn't get it clearly. I would just like you to just elaborate a little more. And Dr. Andrew, I have to agree with Simeon, because I know the problem in Dominica is the amount of wealth these guys have amassed, and they cannot give an account of it. So they have to cling to power because they are scared of what will happen after they leave office. That's all I got to say, Lambi. Thank you.
Right. No, thank you for that, caller. Appreciate that. So Dr. Thomson, Fontaine, we hear all of this, and Simeon spoke about the whole question of fascism and governments trying to control, business and labor and everything, right? But I mean, I just want to bring your attention to something that happened recently. And the government said they've taken an initiative, and they're going to they're going to build houses, and then they're going to build it for people, young people under the age of 45 or under, that they can take mortgages, they can go to the bank and get loans and to own these houses. Now, the government has had a policy of building houses and giving away to people and who never got a title. We don't know if they will ever get one. This was from the CBI funds. All of a sudden, we're not hearing about the CBI funds now. What we're hearing is these people have to go and take loans. Now, as an economist, Dr. Fontaine, and you've looked at Dominica's economy, very large extent, do you think, given the salaries of these young people, and even these young graduates who are coming back and getting jobs, the cost of living today, the price of gas, the price of electricity, the price of groceries, the price of all of those things, just the cost of living, do you seriously believe that these young people are able to, and remember the Minister of Housing told us these units at Bellevue, they cost what, some $400,000 a unit? These units at Bellevue. Do you see these young people being able, given that some of them may have student loans that they're still paying beside other commitments, they want to buy a little transport and so on, and you see them being able to repay those mortgages that we're talking about there? Is this a reality? Dr. Fontaine.
Mr. G, one response to that. Ola, sir, where is that going to happen? When you think about the behavior of this government, and we have been advocating very strongly for the current occupants of the government housing project to be given title, to be given deeds, so that they can begin to build some wealth. So we've been talking about that. So the government says, okay, well, yeah, that's a good idea. People should really start building wealth. So why don't we get the young people who may not have land, who may have to go to the banks and get a loan? The question is, which bank in Dominica is going to give you a loan? Which bank in Dominica in the right mind? In a system where 14%, which is very high, by the way, 14%, even with those very strict rules you have in Dominica, how difficult it is to get a loan in Dominica. Even with those very strict rules, you have 14% of the loans in Dominica non-performing, is that people simply cannot pay back, right? That's very high. The average in a well-developed economy or even in other islands of the Caribbean, the non-performing loan percent is about 5%, 5 to 6%. In Dominica, it is triple that, 15%, 14%. So in that kind of environment, do you really believe that a young person today making $1,500 can go and face a bank for a loan? It's not going to happen. So this government, has a lot of trickery. They try to fool people. They hear the opposition talking, they hear other people talking about what should be done, and then without understanding, they go out there and they push it. So all of a sudden, you're talking about young people building wealth. Well, that was our idea. We've been saying that's what you need to do. You need to be able to create wealth. Simeon talked about the middle class. You need to be able to create a middle class. So now they say, okay, well, the way you do that is to go and get a loan. I wish I had gotten a report on what happened there, how many people actually succeeded on Saturday, and which bank was present to give them loans. It's simply not going to happen. When you consider that this is the same government, Mr. G, that agreed with Hayden that he would sell the Dominican passports, right? But he would not send the money to Dominica. He would himself keep this money, and he would turn around and be the one to fund the projects in Dominica. That's the deal that the government of Dominica struck with Hayden. Whereas in the right, any government with its right sense would simply pay a commission to the seller. But he's allowed to keep the money. And what does he do with this money? What do we see? High-rise buildings in Dubai in his name. And he's so proud. High-rise buildings built on the backs of the Dominican public. While in Dominica, our people have to deal with backed up toilets, roach-infested apartments. Is that what we deserve in Dominica? Is that the best that this government can do to its people? One of the things I detest the most about this government is the way it deals with the people of Dominica. The disdain, the complete, like throwing of crumbs. That you take that, you take this house, you stay in it, and when we're ready, we'll take it back. You stay in this house, and when you die, God forbid, we'll take it away from you and give it to somebody else. You stay in this house, and if we ever hear you criticizing us, we'll take it away from you and give it to somebody else. The disdain with which this government treats the people of Dominica. I say once proud people. Because in my generation, our parents, they build their homes, they work hard, and through Kudme and through the help of the neighbors, they build their homes. Every Saturday people would come around and help them to build and so on. And little by little, I would say, little by little, they got things done. But we've completely moved away from this. And so we need to talk about solutions. We need to talk about how do we deal with this issue. I talked about Dominica being on a tipping point. How do we deal with a situation where we have a government that is arrogant, government that has lost its way, a government that has sold out the country, quite frankly, because those billions of dollars from the sale of our passport is not working for Dominica. It is working for an individual in Dubai who is building high-rise after high-rise, buildings worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So we have a serious problem. So how do we deal with this issue? The number one thing I think that Dominicans need to wrap their mind around is to commit that at the next election, that this government of Dominica has to be a thing of the past. That is the way we begin to solve this problem. I've been looking at the results of some of the people commenting on Facebook, say, okay, we're tired of all this talk. Well, that is a part of the solution. The solution is the next election, we determine that this government of Dominica will be no more. We are tired of this government building the wealth on the backs of the people. We have a prime minister who is rich beyond any metric that we can consider, on a salary of $12,000 EC a month. I mean, these are the kind of issues that I think the Dominican public saw. That's why I said earlier, I wish I could shake Dominicans awake, because we've gone to sleep. We've gone to sleep. We have lost the middle class. Our country is degenerating into violence. Our young people can no longer solve the issues. They're moving around in the dead of night, shooting each other, killing each other, destroying lives, destroying families. And we are just there like nothing. It's okay, it's all right. No, it's not okay, it's not all right. We need to take action. And we begin by demanding this electoral reform that we've been talking about. That is also part of the solution. Demand, Dominicans, that the next election will be free, it will be fair, it will not be tainted by an electoral commission that is in the back pockets of this government. It will not be tainted by the interference of Tony or a Tony Astor fan. It will not be tainted by the importation of individuals who may not be qualified to vote. It will not be tainted by stifling the voices of those who want genuine change for Dominica. And that's how we need to stand up. That's how we begin to right this wrong that is visited upon the people of Dominica. That's how we begin to take our country back from the corruption that Simeon spoke about, so that we can have an independent public service that will stand up against the excesses of this government. You hear of persons double dipping, husband and wife charging government for transportation when they're not using the vehicle at all for government services. The kind of excesses we hear that would never have happened, on the Charles administration or on Edison James administration. Yet we have those excesses over and over again. A public service in tatters, a public service that is completely devoid of any kind of allegiance to the state, but instead their allegiance is to a Labour Party government. My God, we need to change that. Dominicans, wake up. We need to change that, Mr. J. We need to change this government, period. That is how we begin to solve the issues of this country.
Thomson, let's go over to Landy just 1 second. Simeon, maybe you could turn off your mic a little bit. I'm getting some feedback coming. Somebody's mic was on.
My mic is off. My mic is off.
All right. Lambi, let's take a call. You have one?
Yes. Call up on the overseas line. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Dominica.
Evening.
Good evening.
Yes, good evening. Go ahead.
Hello. The thing about that, the Prime Minister lying in the eyes of Dominicans. That man go to St. Joseph in a meeting 2.5 years, almost 3 years ago, and he said to the nation that he's going to tell Dominicans what he does with the money. Up to today, he can present a receipt to Dominicans. This is a man that blatantly thieving from the people. I don't know why Dominicans don't realize security is not in the interest. Security is not in our interest. Even we overseas, we say labor. We lose to Dominica. Security selling all the prime land for people that's not Dominicans. We overseas, when we come back in Cavala State here, we go in. We are going to get land where we can make any benefit out of it. So when they're going overseas and say labor, that's how they're losing too. Scary just giving them scrap. And all the richness of Dominica is for people otherwise. God bless Dominica. Thank you.
And thanks a lot. All right. So I just want to go back and, Dr. Dr. Thomson Fontaine was making a good point. Here it is, and this column is making a point. Here is what it is. The CCG has given us a window, and it said, listen, gentlemen, you need to fix something now. The CCG was not talking to you or me or Simeon. He was talking to all of Dominicans at home and abroad, and he's saying, listen, you have a problem in your electoral system. You have a problem, fix it. Don't go into another election without fixing it. Dr. Andre, earlier on, Simeon mentioned that word fascism. And I'm sure your fellow who's more educated than you can find many other words to use to describe what's going on. The thing is, we have had a government in office for 22 years now. I mean, if we have a democracy, and if things are not going well, things are going so badly that the CCJ now, they couldn't help it again, they're tired. They say, guys, all you need to fix all your business there. It ain't going well, fix it. And Dr. Andre, isn't it about time if we really want to maintain a democracy and have good governance? Remove the fear of the public servant from doing their jobs, remove the fear of the private sector from talking, remove the fear of the people who are looking for a little house and so, to restore the hope, go back to what we used to have before, the honor and integrity of working hard, doing our own thing and not depending on handouts. Don't you think it's about time that we make a little change after 22 years and have a government, even if we say let's do a government of national unity, whatever we do, but let's have a new regime with some new thinking, give us some new hope. What are your thoughts and how should we go about doing that?
Well, this is not rocket science. This is not some type of complicated formula which is required to save the ship of state. This is just persons digging deep within their consciences, saying it cannot be right that I get a 1% annual interest in income, while the comrades get tens of thousands, 20, 25, 30, double their incomes in whatever way. This is not a situation where senior civil servants who've toiled through their professions trying to move upwards only to hear of some political operative in the Prime Minister's office being given $7 million compensation to build yet another useless concrete jungle called a hotel. Dominicans have to say enough is enough. There's only so much we can take. It's our lives, it's our families, it's our children. We are not doomed to be persons with cutlasses weeding grass at the side of the road. We can do better. We can earn a higher income. We can utilize our education to get better jobs, to get better wages. It is within our grasp to demand those things. We are no less than the stars. We are no less than our regional counterparts. We deserve better than this. We deserve better than a brown paper bag being delivered between 11 and 12 o'clock midnight with one mastiff bread, a tin of corned beef, or a tin of sardines, and a pound of sugar. We deserve better than this. We have to get out of this slumber. We have to collectivize. We have to incentivize. We have to come together. We have to say that within our unity lies our strength. We cannot allow ourselves to be subjected to divide and rule. You cannot have, for example, an organization saying that, okay, we got our 1%, we will not join the other interest groups fighting for a semblance of equality. That is their fight. We have gotten our 1%. We've gotten our 5%. That is classic divide and rule. We have to show a degree of maturity that is being shown elsewhere, not only regionally, but internationally. There are no excuses now. We can't say, well, we don't have television. We can't say we don't have cell phones. Some of the younger folks have three, one in each back pocket and another one in the front pocket. We know what's going on in the state. We know what we can do to improve our lot. And we have to have the confidence and the maturity that we can achieve what others have been achieving. That is the bottom line. We cannot just accept this defeatism. We cannot just accept the crumbs. We cannot accept to be bought. And then our silence becomes supreme. We have to change that paradigm. We have to change that mentality. We have to discover ourselves. We have to rediscover our state. And we haven't reached that stage as yet. And we can only do through collective action. Collective action. Collective action. We have to probably adverse or espouse Eugenius Charles' famous dictum in 2000. We have to look within the mirror and realize the strength of character and the strength of unity to save this country. We don't need a committee for salvation.
One second.
Nothing wrong with a committee for salvation historically. We need probably a movement to save Dominica. Movement implying the collectivity of people as opposed to a group of chosen elders. a committee, a movement, a mass movement, a people's movement, because it's within the people lies the strength to save our nation. The CCJ cannot do it for us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Andre. Lambi, you want to take a call?
Yeah, we have a couple of calls coming in there. Good evening, caller. Thanks for joining us. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good evening to you, Lambi. Good evening to your entire panel. Thanks for taking my call. Lambi and the rest of the panel, Dominica is at the crossroads. I mean, I know in all developed countries, all developed islands, when you have development going on, yes, you expect crimes and criminal activities. That's not the case in point in Dominica. I don't know if you guys remember back in 2019 when the wife of Roosevelt Skerritt, Melissa Popon, said to the world, to the entire world, that they have the snipers, they have the Navy SEALs. I mean, something is definitely wrong. Like I've said before, in order for this crime and this criminal activity to come to a halt, Roosevelt Skerritt, Rayburn Blackmore, the entire cabinet needs to surrender. They need to demit office ASAP. Unless these guys do that, we will have, I'm not calling it on Dominica, but this murder, this homicide will continue. Dominica is at a crossroad. We need to go down on our knees and pray because Dominica is under evil. Roosevelt Skerritt is an evil man. Good night. Stay blessed and nothing less.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're taking a call, Lambi?
There was another one coming in there, but he just stopped momentarily, so you can go on until he comes back.
So the callers will call back. And then as the call comes, just interrupt us. But you know, Simeon, I wanted to come back to you because you see, we're coming down to a theme now because we something has to be done. People are saying too much talk, but you need to talk and to put the education out and information. One of the things I want our talk to deliver tonight, I believe if you want to make a real change, as Eugenia said, you know, and as somebody mentioned, the movement to save Dominica, collective action, you have to have collective action. We saw that in 79, you had collective action in 79, and there was a change. I'm saying that if you're going to get individual people, you want to take a call before I go? Take the call before I go.
Yes, caller, please go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Good night.
Go right ahead.
Yes, hello?
Yeah, you're being heard. Please go right ahead.
Okay. Dominica needs a change. But on the panel there now, there's Dominica. No, there is nobody right now. The people who have to change Dominica, they are not born yet. Not in this age.
Thank you. All right. Thanks a lot for that. Now, Dr. Andre, sorry, Simeon, I was saying this, that you see sometimes that people are talking, but everybody's talking and each person wants to do a little separate thing. Now, how will it work? If we're talking about unification, collective action, a movement to save the country, how does it work if people who are talking that language are still trying to do a little thing on the side and not trying to get involved in one big movement, one collective action? To my mind, you are not going to get that kind of change unless all of the opposition forces decide that they're going to put their resources together and they're going to put people forward under one leader of their choice, charismatic leader that can win friends and influence people, move people from, influence even some of the people who support the Labour Party now, whose life really has not changed meaningfully in any way over the last 20 years. And there are many of the people who support the government for whatever reason, whose lives have not changed. Somebody, yes, Simeon, go right ahead.
But you see, that has to come from an understanding of what is government and what is power. And unfortunately, too many of our people have not reached that level of maturity of understanding to know what exactly is government and what exactly is power. For the caller a while ago to say the people to change Dominica have not been born yet, that person has a very dim estimation of the quality of people that Dominica has produced. If anything, Dominica has produced some of the most brilliant minds of the Caribbean as they search all over the world in various international organizations serving in different spheres. So for any Dominican to call and say that the people to change Dominica have not been born yet, that person seems to me to be spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and culturally dead, because it means therefore they cannot identify with who Dominicans really are, a creative people, a people with a certain level of resilience and power to get things done. The history of Dominicans going all the way back to the 1930s, if anybody with a sense of history will know that Dominicans are a very powerful creative force. And so we can start now, and I would like to begin with this statement that the people of Dominica must be prepared, as Dr. Thomson has said, and other people, now to steal back the power for themselves, because power has been stolen from them. Economic power, political power, social power, cultural power has been stolen from the people of Dominica, and the people of Dominica must now decide to steal power for themselves. But I'm afraid we may not be able to achieve that, because we have a very large segment of our population who seem to me to be nullified by rum and siwo. We have a very large section of our population who are very indifferent and nonchalant to the things that are happening in Dominica, and seem to think that the only impetus for existence has to be rum, siwo, good time. And that is why the powers that be are taking advantage of that level of ignorance and quelling their innocence. Because, I mean, just recently, I understood that the cricket in the stadium, there were Dominicans who were given free tickets to go and see cricket in the stadium. Now, where have we reached that level that somebody can dip into their pocket and take out a $10 and a $20 and a $15 to go and see a game of cricket at the national stadium, that they have to depend on parliamentary representatives to give them a free ticket worth $10, $15, and $20 to go and watch a cricket game? Is that how we have become? You see, one of the things we have to look at is that to put on the table that any real government is concerned with human development. Human development has to be the focus of any government. Okay? And what does human development means? It means people empowerment, it means social enhancement, and it means economic stability and prosperity. That is how you judge a government. You judge a government by how it has been able to lift its people up from one level to the next, so that they are empowered to create wealth for themselves, that they are empowered to take the steps to advance themselves without the need for government or political interference, that they are able, through their own personal empowerment, to create a certain level of social enhancement. And that's what people like Libla did. That's what people like Frank Barron did. That's what people like Eugenia Charles and Patrick John did. Okay? What they did is that they empowered people to take ownership of their own development. And as they took ownership of their own development, they were able, in turn, to grow the villages from which they came, to expand the communities from which they came, and to allow their own roots, so to speak, to grow and to flourish. What we have today is the antithesis of that, where the government feels that it must be the one responsible for putting money in people's pocket, for giving people houses, for buying groceries for people, for putting clothes on people's back, for paying people bills, to give them tickets to go to Creole Festival and to cricket and to a cricket game. That is disempowerment of people, because what it means is that if you continue to do those things for people, people will not be able to grow and to expand themselves. And you know, I do not want to contribute, because someone, and I'm going to different topics there based on what was said tonight. Someone posited the view that with development comes crime. I think a minister of government once said so. But there are countries in the world who have progress beyond measure without crime. Malaysia, Singapore, Taiwan, Botswana, Denmark, Sweden, Uruguay, and the list goes on. There are countries that have been able to progress in a very advanced way without crime. So where are we getting this misnomer of a notion that crime comes with development. This is absolute rubbish. This is absolute rubbish. And we have to remove that from our psyche. And to answer Dr. Andre's question, that change, he said change is not a rocket science and it's not a complicated process. While this may be theoretically true, I pity anybody who takes on the reins of power after this government leaves power, because it is not going to be an easy undertaking. Because the dismantling of the fabric of governments and the institutions of governance are so destroyed that anybody who follows them is going to have a nightmare to reform the system of governments and to get even the public servants who are there now to understand how government works. The banking sector, who are so embedded in the government. Places like the civic organizations like the DIC, the DEF, the DHTA, all these people are so embedded in government that they depend on government to empower themselves. Whereas in real economies, Dr. Thomson Fontaine will tell you, it is a private sector and the civic organization which drives the growth and development of a country. And when you have these sectors depending on government for their growth and development, I can tell you anybody who takes over is going to have a very hard time. In closing off on a few points that were raised tonight.
Before you do that, Simeon, Lambert, did you have a call?
Yes, there's a caller patiently waiting.
A quick call on Simeon.
Please go ahead, caller.
Yes. Good evening to the panel. Good evening. Good evening.
Evening.
Brother Gregoire, you usually have that summary, let's do it all together. But you always premise it on political parties coming together and that kind of like. I think one of the things we have to do in solutions is also look at our solution patterns that we have followed and assess them on probabilities and really see whether those same solution patterns can continue to be. I think Dominica has reached a stage of political polarization that what Dr. Andre presents is maybe what we really have to premise, that sense of where it's not about pulling the political parties together, but for the politicians to lose their politicalness for a minute. You see, we cannot build in that political process because it is so polarized. And so we have to find a solution within that reality. And
what do you recommend as the solution then? What is in your opinion? What is it?
Well, I like what Brother Andre took great pains to make a distinction between the unity and the. I like what he thinks, and I think as we move forward in the conversations, we need to extend the conversations to a broader civic set of people, some kind of way, through the topics, through indirect. But I think we have to take that approach now than just calling and expecting the politicians to be the cohesiveness of that movement, because we've been trying.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that the civic groups and you're talking about, are they ready and willing to form one cohesive group to come together? Are they willing? I mean, let's forget the politicians now. Those same groups they willing to come together now and form a.
Well, that is my point. The same argument has to go to the groups. You see, it's not working for us. It's not. That's why I say, in a funny kind of way, it is almost a singular movement that collectively happens. And so I cannot really, but I'm asking you as that entity that brings that cohesiveness together, that let us try in our conversations to make the conversation more civic in terms of leadership. We don't even call in for it. Well, I think we have to build that kind of thing. The capacity of economic conversation, I think, needs to get more priority in our consultations. That is a pathway towards enticing that kind of civic response. So all I'm saying is, let us stop pivoting it at the politicians. I have to call Lennox to get the view. No, let us call some civic leadership sometimes. Let us shift that kind of paradigm of the politics, because the politics is what is helping this madness to continue. It is exploited.
All right.
I just wanted to add that perspective some.
Yes, but let me just say something. I didn't hear anybody call Lennox Linton him on this panel tonight. I didn't hear anybody call Bernard Ito's name might, we never mention any political groups, but I think the caller is right. There needs to be unification. I agree with you, Dr. Andre, that people need to come together and decide to take back their country.
Yeah,
From
that is true, Mr. Gregoire. But at the same time, never before in the history of Dominica have this country been so polarized. And I don't care what anybody thinks, you cannot divorce or separate the polarization of our society from the government we have in power today. Because never before in the history of Dominica have we heard things like, you had better be dead than red. And if you're not red, you're dead. And this person is not one of us. And if this person is not one of us, they cannot get a house, they cannot get a scholarship, they cannot get a loan in the bank. Never before have we heard that. Never before in the history of Dominica, the last point the caller made, have the very professionals been so afraid to speak up for fear of retribution or denial of opportunities. Where does that come from? We saw in the 70s where people were not afraid to speak. Even under the Iron Lady, people were not afraid to speak. Under UWP, people were not afraid to speak. But yet all of a sudden now there are people who are so afraid to speak, and there are people who have planted themselves in almost every organization in Dominica, even in church, in choirs, in fundraising committees, in village councils, to spy on people to go back and say who's speaking for or against the government. And my statement earlier on that the thief comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy is very apt and very relevant. And while we, of course, we would like to see that level of community building, look at what has happened to the Ministry of Community Development and Local Government, a major ministry in Dominica that was set up and institutionalized for the cohesion of small villages and communities and the development of allowing people to take ownership of the process of their own grassroots development and leadership. Even that has dissipated to some extent. And so when we talk about polarization, we have to take ownership of where the polarization, before we can start to talk about unity, we have to conscientiously and clinically examine the reasons for the level of polarization in the first place. Because it is not about sweeping it under the carpet or throwing it under the bed. We have to look at it where it comes from so that we do not repeat it. Because never again in the history of Dominica must we come to the stage where a government denies people the opportunities of the state because of who they support. Never again must people be denied the opportunities to advance in life if they do not support another. Never again. And if we're to advance to unity and progress and cohesion and community, we have to be able to look at the source of our division and our polarization, take ownership of it, dismantle it, demystify it, and as the word was said earlier on, make a major paradigm shift. Because we can only have our paradigm shift will only come when we have a methodological shift. If we do not have a methodological shift, we will not obtain that paradigm shift. And in order for us to have that methodological shift, we have to change our practices and our patterns of behavior into a more positive outlook, recognizing what is said in our national anthem, all for each and each for all.
So let's do this, Simeon. You know, everybody's agreeing that part of that divisiveness, you know, a lot of that is due to the current regime, their tactics, the way they operate, all right? The people are saying, okay, they're the one who are dividing and putting fear in people and doing all the things that we're doing. What I'm hearing is that the only way that you can move forward and remove all these obstacles is to change the regime. You're talking about a regime change, right? Dr. Andre is saying, and allow me, I'm going to take that as a caller to hold on. Dr. Andre is saying, if you're going to do this, you need to have a mass movement of people, a collection of people. And everybody needs to get inside, you know, something. We've had a regime there for 22 years and it's not working for us. It's creating all this fear and divisiveness and so on. It's not working. Why don't we try something else? We don't have to hate the government. We don't have to be non-supporters of the government or supporters of the government. Because let's try something else. Let us try something which is going to eliminate some of those things, give the country some room to breathe, to stop people from hating each other, not talking to neighbors or spying on the neighbors, and people from being afraid to speak because they may not get a little handout. Why not give the country a breather? So the caller was talking about, let's look beyond the political groups and look at all the civic groups and organizations and people. Fair enough. But sooner or later, the way you change a regime and you have a new government is to have, you have to have a put together candidates and have to go and face an election at the polls. They have to win 11 seats to form the government. It seems to me that we have to do something if we really agree that we've had enough of what is going on and we need to have something new, something fresh, give each country a chance to breathe. Let Dominicans start talking to each other and unite and be one again. Let Kudme and self-help and all those things come back again, where people can earn and feel the honor of being able to earn from the sweat of their brow. No, they don't have to wait for handouts. They can be independent enough that they can go to a bank and take a loan rather than have somebody give them a handout. Lambi, you want to take a call now? You have a call?
Yes, we do have a caller. Oh, the caller left.
Right. So Dr. Andre, Dr. George, let's talk about this because you see, so let's go, Lambi, let's take the call.
Yes, caller. Thanks for coming back. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Dominicans are in what you call a political coma. And unless they get out from that coma, they're not going to move forward. You have a president who is as wicked as hell. I remember working with that man when I was a fire officer. Look at him now. He does nothing. He says nothing. There's a young child that's missing. You haven't heard a word from Charles Fabre. It's just unbelievable. You have some guys in Dominica call themselves ministers. Gaston Sebulsaf is there. I have never seen a bunch of pirates running a country, and nobody does nothing. It's only, to me, the only way you're going to have a change in Dominica, it might be a coup, but not by election. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, let Dr. Andre, Dr. George, jump in, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you very much. If I just may, I wanted to respond to a caller who called earlier, and he directed a question toward me regarding the whole idea of crime and the responsibility of governance in Dominica. And he felt that it was not, he was a little vague in terms of my response. And so essentially my point, to answer him directly, is that one of the fundamental, in fact, the primary purpose for government is for welfare and security of people. And where there is a crisis, as we have noted tonight, and the need for new direction, it means, therefore, that there is a lacking in governance. There is a problem that needs to be addressed. And so I am not sure what he missed about it, but I recognize him very well. He's my countryman. He's from Salisbury, my good friend. But yes, the whole idea that there needs to be a stronger governance present. And of course, I mentioned certain philosophers' name, Plato and Aristotle, all these folks there, but that's not important. The important thing is that government have to provide safety and security for people at any cost. And so what is going on in Dominica there, it needs emergency attention, period.
Well, yes. And I think everybody's saying the same thing. I mean, the countries are the doldrums. It needs to move on. And if the regime is not capable, or it does not look like it has the tools or wherewithal, or even the desire to move on to something new, I want to get Dr. Andre's views on that. Lamb, you want to take a quick call?
Yes. Caller, please go ahead. Caller, you're not paying. Yes, please go ahead.
I want to make an observation there. I hear people make statements like never before have secret government, attacked within quotes people because they did not support the regime. That is not 100% accurate. Right now, it is being done openly, blatantly. But it has happened where individuals, all the people in government had to do was to imagine of think that somebody was not supporting them, and they would deny them all opportunities that they were giving to the people who were raising their flag and shouting, whether it was freedom or labor or whatever it is. So this thing has happened in the past. They used to go to people's homes, supporters' homes, and discuss individuals in the service whom they thought did not support them. The only difference now is that it is widely and ruthlessly being done. But it has happened, and maybe people didn't notice or they didn't care. So that is what I would like to say. Just trying to diminish the thing that people talk about as if the political victimization is something that is new. It is worse now, but it has happened and happened in the past. I mean, ministers used to hide the documents to try and prevent people from participating in committees that were developing material for school. It happened. So it's not something new. All they have to do is think, oh, he is not supporting us, he is not supporting us, and they devise ways of holding the people back. As an individual, my theory was you can hold me back, but you cannot hold me down. And there were probably other people who thought the same way that I thought. So probably we need to correct the statement or to adjust it. That right now it works, but it has happened in the past.
Thank you, caller.
Hopefully.
Thank you, caller. We do appreciate it.
Yes, that's a fair comment. But I think we're moving beyond that. Really, what we're saying is we need now to move away from that. That's what we're saying. And if the regime is perpetuating that, we need to do something about it. But that's not the only problem. Why we looked at the host of things Dr. Thomson Fontaine mentioned about the economy and the crime and all the other things that have been happening, and people don't really have a chance to be able to self-actualize in the way they did before. People cannot save. People are not able to live a standard of living. The middle class is virtually non-existent now. So Dr. Andre and Dr. Fontaine, I mean,
yes, in fact, Sheridan, I wanted to comment very, very briefly, on the caller before the last, and also quickly on the last call as well. But the idea that the government cannot be changed or people is really not true. What you will find is that as soon as we get the electoral reform, we'll have a new government, and that's the exact reason why this government is fighting tooth and nail to prevent electoral reform. They know better than you and me that if people are to vote on a level playing field, that they will be out. So I don't want Dominicans to lose hope. I want Dominicans to understand that every single government that has been formed anywhere in the world has come to an end, and this government will. And their lifespan is the lifespan of this electoral cycle. So let's not fool ourselves. It is going to happen. We will get change. And with regards to what the lady said previously, the last caller, I think she's right. What we're talking about is the extent, and she was also right to make the comment that is the extent to which it is done. You're better read than dead. I mean, this naked in your face type of things where people who need the help are not given help, And also this mendicant society thing that is placed on us. I remember in 2014, when I was involved in the elections, that was one of my biggest concerns. That this government was creating a society that will forever have their hands out, their begging bowls out, forever be in a begging mode. And that was my concern. And I've seen it sadly come to pass. That our people now, even to go to a cricket game, my goodness, they have to rely on government for that. I mean, come on, that's not Dominica that I grew up in. That's not the Dominica that I dream of. That's not the Dominica that I fantasize about. We can do better. We absolutely can do better. And that's why I do not want individuals to lose hope. Let us, those of us who know how to pray, let's keep praying. Those of us who who know how to speak, let us keep speaking. Those of us who know how to stand up, let us stand up, because too many people I find these days are too easily convinced otherwise for filthy lucre, for a little bread, a little $5, a little handout. They're prepared to compromise on their beliefs. We can do better. We certainly can.
Yes, and Dr. Andre, I just wanted to say this, I mean, yes, we can do better. We've done better before. We know we can do better. And one of the things that we must never underestimate, and somebody mentioned that in the panel tonight, the level, the quality of human resource that Dominica has all over the world, in Dominica, right there at home. And there are many Dominicans heading corporations and working in high levels in corporations, have a lot of expertise. The new frontier of data that's going to rule the world. We have people who are involved in technology at the highest levels, and in the universities and all over the place. We can do a lot better. But here's the thing, Dr. Andre. I mean, it's not like somebody has to say, okay, well, you hate a government to change a government, or you hate an individual. You don't have to. You just have to want better for the country. Give the country a chance to do better. That is all there is, I mean, this argument of, if you say something about the change of regime, then you hate the government. There's nothing like that. These are all human beings in the government. All these people were selected by the people in the community, of course, aided and abetted by a few little tricks there and a little, treating here and a little bribery there and bringing people from overseas. Yes, we need to eliminate that. And I think, Dr. Andre, this is what the CCJ is saying to us. Give yourself a room to breathe. Do not go back into an election with this thing as it is there. Fix it and get an even playing field, and then go out there and let's have a good contest and let the middleman win. I think we're saying we love our country, and we're saying everybody should listen. It's time to make a change. After 22 years, and your life is not improving, your living standards, your quality of life is not improving, your savings deteriorating. Yeah, I mean, all this talk about the farmers who told you have $30 million in the bank, go and get it. They can't get it. They're not able to take it. Dr. Andre, your further thoughts?
Well, I think the CCJ is basically saying, certainly in the judgment, because it clearly decided to make pronouncements with respect to the integrity of the electoral process. It could have simply limited itself to the narrow legalistic issue of jurisdiction, impose costs against the opposition. And that's another indication that they are sending a message. Their refusal toward costs against the petitioners who basically lost in the CCJ. In other words, and I've said it elsewhere, and it seems to me the only rational explanation for that decision is that the CCJ did not want to reward wrongdoing in terms of the integrity of the elections. That is why they refused to award costs against the petitioners. The CCJ basically has thrown the ball into our court. And the CCJ is indicating to us in as best judicial language that they can, that quite frankly, faith without good works is a waste of time. They are telling us basically that democracy is not a spectator sport. They are telling us indirectly that you cannot sell your soul for a brown paper bag delivered at 11:30 in the night. They're telling us that, look, you cannot sacrifice the well-being of the majority of your people for a few crumbs or for a small promotion when the cost of that promotion is the integrity, is your very soul. So they're sending a plethora of messages to us. And the fundamental question is, are we listening? Some of us are listening. There are persons like your panelists who are speaking their minds, irrespective of the consequences that will be brought up to bear upon them. There are certain persons who march on Wednesdays. And take a look at the profile of these folk. These are not wealthy people. These are not people who have money hidden under their coconut fiber mattress, that in the days of scarcity, they have resources to count on. These are ordinary, hardworking people of integrity, people who have been touched by the enormity of the crisis that we face, people who've been affected by the wanton display of ostentation and wealth by a narrow few, people who've become indignant at the extent to which the coffers of the state are being raped. These people have taken up the task, irrespective of who sees them, who hears them, to walk, not to walk on anybody's toes, but to walk in the interest of their country and in the interest of the values of their country. And that is what I mean when I say we must put together a movement to save Dominica, where everyone from every walk of life, irrespective of where they are socially, irrespective of their means, can come to the realization that, look, if we don't confront this head on, we will not have a country to build, will not have a country to save. Wesley will be no more. There will be no lands in Wesley used to build any international airport. They will go to those who are seeking to run from justice in their own country. That is the existential crisis that we face. You face the loss of what you know, what you cherish. You face being relegated into an apartment for which you have no title. You face a prospect where you are buying tomatoes and buying water from foreign countries. You face alienation in your own country. You face being relegated to the status of second-hand citizen in your own country. That is why there has to be a movement to save people, a movement of persons from every corner, from Capuchin to what's the other place name on the other side, from Vacaz to the darkest or the most far-fetched part of Grand Bay. We face persons to come together, to take a stand for their country. That's what we need right now.
Yeah, but Dr. Andre, I believe the CCJ's comment is also telling us something. You know, when we're talking about let's all get together to make a change, everyone, you know, everyone will get together to make a change. The CCJ's also said, you know, we have our concerns about the elections you had before. They were tainted, your process was tainted. So it's saying correct it. This was maybe that you made a mistake. Correct it. Lam, do you want to take a call?
Yes. On the overseas line, caller, please go ahead.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
All right, this is Sinclair Mitchell here. Listen, I've been listening to you guys and with a lot of interest. And I must say that everybody seems to be doing a very good job at articulating what you think, you know, the problem is, what your perception of what the problem is. And you may very well be correct. But my question for your panel tonight is there a voice in Dominica? Is there someone that, in your opinion, you think has what Mr. G talked about this evening, the gravitas, the charisma, the likability, and I bring up that word again, likability, who has the intestinal fortitude and the support of the people, of all of the different factions in the opposition. And I'm not just here talking about the parliamentary opposition, but all of the factions that have risen up here in the last few years. One person that you can point to who is able to stand up to the government's leadership and to articulate a case against the government. I mean, you guys are doing a very good job at pointing out what the problem is, and we do that every Tuesday night. But who amongst the opposition, not just the parliamentary opposition, all of the factions, who do you think has that strength, that internal strength, and would command the support of Dominicans at home and abroad to make a case against the government that would win the next election? And you might say what you want to about the prime minister, but he seemed to be doing a very good job at rallying his forces and those who support him.
Let me just, Dr. Mitchell, let me just engage you 1 minute, because I mean, you're somebody we know, you're very articulate. Now, let us make an assumption that you are a part of what you describe as the opposition. To me, when I listen to you, I'm making that assumption, and it's a hypothetical situation. There isn't that assumption. I'm not saying that you are. And I'm saying when you asked who, I find you sound like someone who could do that job. I mean, you're so articulate. I mean, you're experienced, you're knowledgeable, you understand all the issues. What do you think? Do you think because I don't think you're saying there's nobody. I'm saying who is the person? I'm saying, would you consider yourself to be a potential candidate?
So that's not my calling in life, my friend.
I know. I mean, come on.
My calling in life. That's
no.
my calling in life. I was not called to be a politician. I'm a citizen of the kingdom of God, and I represent Him, and I try to do a good job at that.
Well, Dr. Mitchell, I'll have to tell you, once you put it that way, I have to leave it to Dr. Andre. He's a lot more qualified than me to engage you in that discussion.
I don't know about my qualification. But I know Dr. Sinclair. I have a great admiration for him. As I said, I'm a little older than him, but I certainly know his background, and I think he is the epitome of what we are looking for in terms of a new Dominica. Worked hard throughout your life, make sacrifice, be frugal, keep your eye on the ball to achieve something based on the efforts, based on the sweat of your brow. And essentially, he's the exemplification of that which we long for. The question of who among us can lead, who among Dominicans can lead that opposition, I subscribe to the view that events certainly throw up leaders based on the circumstances. And we don't have to look far. We can look at the Ukraine. Many persons laughed at Zelensky before this crisis, this invasion. This guy has displayed leadership qualities that one can only assume that they were God-given, because he did not show any manifestation of those rare and special qualities. I subscribe to the view that Dominica is no exception. At the appropriate time, there will be a person or persons who will rise and take the mantle of leadership. In terms of moral fortitude, Mr. Sinclair, Dr. Sinclair, I'm sorry. It is not for me to say who will lead the show, but there are persons who have shown profiles of courage, to borrow a phrase linked to John F. Kennedy, the late one. Who among us has been steadfast, irrespective of every persecutorial action taken against him? Who among us has stood steadfast against every incitation to throw hot water on him? Who among us has stood steadfast even while they bore false witness and false charges against him? Who among us has given people the hope and the belief that their principles is worth standing up for? There's only one, but there are others. There's not only one. There's only one we know of. So I will not subscribe to the view that there's no one. You've said that the Prime Minister has shown, well, I don't want to mischaracterize you. I will just say that the effect of what you're saying is that he has shown some talent in molding people together. Well, he has shown a talent in alienating people together. He's shown a talent of persecuting people. He's shown a talent of discriminating against people. He's shown a talent of not giving them assistance, even when NGOs have given him $30 million to give assistance to everyone, to every citizen, irrespective of their political affiliation. So the fact that he remains...
I was not...
Oh, you don't like that part of the conversation?
I was not making... Can I respond though? I was not making a moral judgment.
Okay. You don't like that part of my response.
He was showing. No, I was not making a moral judgment. I was saying that he's displayed qualities of leadership.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that in the opposition that there is not anyone. I'm saying who are we subscribing to? Who are we presenting to the people? Because it would seem that every other week in Dominica, a new opposition faction is arising. And I think Mr. G kind of hinted to that. Why don't all these people come together and select someone among themselves that they think is qualified to lead a movement? Because every Tuesday we talk about the problem, but what is the solution to the problem? I'm not here taking a side. like I didn't take a side the other day.
Doc, we know you've taken a side. Doc, you're not pulling anybody.
But
Doc,
my
I
response,
respect you, but you're not pulling anybody. You have taken a side.
No, I'm not taking a side. I'm just saying that we are talking about the problem every Tuesday, but there is no one that we are saying, well, this person qualifies to lead a movement, else there wouldn't be a new faction every other week in Dominica.
Well,
there is a new faction of the opposition that is arising.
Dr. Sinclair, I don't know about this new faction. But
the
it
new
will be
faction
of me to say who should lead the struggle. I
Right.
will not make that decision. It will be presumptuous of me to do that. But I respect your views. I respect what you've done, as I said. But between you and I, you have taken a side, my friend.
Okay, so listen to this. This is my take.
Irving, you don't know me. You don't
This
know
is my
me.
take.
Okay, I don't know you. Okay, I don't know you. Okay.
We grew up
But
in
this
the-
is my take, eh?
town, but you don't know me, and I think
Okay, Doc, I don't know you. Okay, guys. So I don't know you.
Just before your take, Simeon. Just before
Yeah,
your take.
But I would like to come in, Mr. Gregoire.
I know. I want to give you a comment, but I just want to say one more thing to Dr. Sinclair because I expect that he'll want to leave us shortly. Dr. Sinclair, it is very easy, to look very good and you have the ability to galvanize all kind of thing around you if you have $100 million available to you. If you have all the state's coffers, you have LPOs that can be flying black is white. If you have all these largesse available to you from the state, it's easy to look that way, I'm Dr. Sinclair. And so I agree with you. I mean, some leader will arise and should arise. And as I said, I am not discounting you. I'm not eliminating you from that. You might say it's not your calling, but when you speak, for example, you remind me of the so many hundreds and hundreds of Dominicans who have your kind of skill, your kind of capacity, your kind of experience and knowledge, who can provide that kind of leadership for the country. So I think all is not lost. A leader will arise, but as Dr. Andre said,
don't you think at some point in the discussion, that, like you talked about earlier about a movement, that every movement has to have a leader? And don't you also think that if the other factions of the opposition that are arising every other week in Dominica were convinced of the fact that there was a leader, that those factions would not in fact be formed, at least not in the way that they've been formed, because each of them are being formed with a leader, and so you are in fact weakening your own case.
All right, so Dr. Sinclair, I mean, I really appreciate your intervention with us tonight. I mean, it's really, you enriched the conversation. I mean, you uplifted it and you got us thinking. Everybody who's listening, I think you're getting them thinking. They will have the opinions of what you say. I mean, most people probably have already arrived at the conclusion that you have taken a side. As Dr.
We know he is taking a side.
But I wanted to, Dr. Sinclair, I want to thank you. I want to thank you.
In fairness here, would you allow me just a few moments here?
Well, yeah, just a few, because I want to hear from Simeon Joseph because he's dying to say something.
Could you just give me a few seconds here?
Okay.
Irving doesn't know me. We grew up in the same town. My father and his father were friends. He doesn't know me, and he knows nothing about my politics. Now, if Gabriel came there and Gabriel said that about me, then that would be closer to the truth. But Gabriel knows me. Gabriel is my attorney, and Gabriel and myself, we talk a lot. Irving and myself were never friends. We knew each other because we grew up in the same town. He doesn't know me, and I'm telling you that the judgment that he's making about me as a man of God, I'm telling you, it is totally and absolutely wrong. And for someone who subscribes to the law to come to a conclusion without evidence, my friend, is the wrong thing to do. And I'm telling you, you don't know me. And I'm offended by the fact that you rush to those kinds of conclusions about me. You don't know me. You and I never even had conversations as young men growing up.
Yeah, but I think you've made the point. I think you've made the point.
Just 1 second. My only response to Dr. Sinclair is, "Thou protest too much, methinks." That's my only response. Simeon, you can take it over.
That phrase doesn't apply.
And I'll tell you this. I would love to have you on our next show. For you to give us a little bit more about your thoughts. I value your opinion and your thoughts and your ideas, and I really would like to have you. I'll call you and we'll talk see if what we can arrange. I'd love to hear some more from you. All right, Dr. Sinclair. So thanks a lot for your all right.
No
Thanks
problem.
a lot for your contribution tonight. But I will call you.
No problem. You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
Yes, I will talk some more. I would love to hear some more from you. All right, so thanks a lot.
Okay.
Now, Simeon, you really wanted to say something.
I just wanted to respond to this because you see, on the latter point of every other week a political party crops up. One of the good things, one of the great things that these tainted charismatic leaders are able to do is to divide and rule. And divide and rule is a tool of a tainted charismatic leader. Now, to me, my response is I detect an ambiguous anomaly of an antithesis. Because when you talk about having intestinal fortitude, okay? Intestinal fortitude, to my mind, speaks of having that courage and that determination to do something difficult and unpleasant for people. So if you're talking about who among us has the leadership to have that intestinal fortitude, and that is the term, I didn't raise the term. Intestinal fortitude speaks to having courage. You know what courage is? Stand up in the face of difficulty. Determination, meaning to walk through fire and to do something difficult and unpleasant for people. Who among us has displayed that? Okay? But if we have to speak about the comparison of the political leader of the government who has that charismatic inclination to bring people, there are many historical figures in history who have been able to do that. Hitler, Mao Zedong, Juan Perón, Pinochet of Chile, Mugabe of Zimbabwe, Marcos of the Philippines, Duvalier of Haiti. And most recently, Boris Johnson, who got the largest victory for the Conservatives in England, and as well Margaret Thatcher. All of these people have been able to gather support. But you see, it's an antithesis to talk about gathering support because there are historical figures in history who have been able to do that, right? Versus the people who have had to stand against them with courage and fortitude and determination to confront them. Okay? And so we have to understand, you can either be someone with intestinal fortitude to unite, to bring people together, to work towards bringing your citizenry and your nation together, and having the courage to gather people together and in the end up dividing people to rule.
Yes, very, very, very well said. I know, Dion, you wanted to have a moment ago. I don't know whether you still have something that you want to contribute to this. Because I really want us to be coming to an end now, so we're winding down. But I think we've made the point, and I think Dr. Sinclair has helped us. And I would love to hear more from him, frankly. I think he's probably agreeing with us that maybe there needs to be some changes, but you need to find a leader. Maybe that's what he's saying to us. I would like to hear more from him on that. Maybe he's recognizing what we are recognizing and saying there needs to be some kind of a change, but somebody needs to stand out as a leader. Maybe that's what he's saying. Maybe he'll explain that to us the next time he gets a chance to talk to us. Dr. Dion George, your closing remarks?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I really appreciate being on the show. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your civic duty, education, as always, very learned, and I really appreciate it. On the question of the last caller, I am not Samuel. You know, it's Samuel, they said, that was sent to identify David. And then he had to look at all the brothers. And then he asked the father, is there any other child? And they say, yeah, there is one at the back there watching those goats and those sheep. So I'm not the one to predict who is the next leader. What I can humbly say as a political scientist is that recently there were elections in Grenada where a novice, very young man, by the age of 40-something, early 40s, was able to defeat an incumbent very experienced. We have seen in St. Lucia a change of government. We are seeing in St. Kitts, there has been a change of government, and there's a new election coming up. And who knows, it might change again. We have seen even in England, Great Britain, that the government stepped down. And so if one were to prophesize, like Samuel had to pick David, who is that one person that can replace El Supremo? I am not that prophet. But I know God says that he can do wonderful things. He can move mountains and he can use stones to act if he needs to. So I leave that for God to decide. But I'm very certain that there are people who are able to do the work that God would call them to do. I would leave that as that. The other thing I want to touch on quickly in my closing statement, because I wanted to get back to it, which I did not get a chance to, but that's okay. I mean, this discussion is so healthy and it's so educative, is the whole idea about fixing our elections. I think the CCJ has mentioned several things. Interestingly, they were not very specific, you know. They just gave a cursory synopsis of what they believe needs to fix. But I'll touch on one more thing before I go, is the overseas voters. I am part of a group, Mr. Gregoire, and I heard somebody said something the other day, and I almost just removed myself from the group. The person said, and it's a PhD, you know, the person is in chemistry, that the elections in Dominica had nothing to do with overseas voters. But because there is a PhD in chemistry, somebody might listen to them and think, I said to myself, listen to that stupidness. When we all know that was a major factor that influenced Dominica. So I heard the last caller talk about likability. I saw Dr. Andre laugh like he's trying to be funny. I remember our last conversation on the panel that we had. Because it's not about likability. It's about the irregularities that happen in the election. About the overseas voters. Sir, if I may read from what the Joint Mission recommends in my closing statement. It says that concurrent with the re-verification exercise, the electoral office should seek to engage immigration department to identify the electors on concurrent list who resides in overseas and in Dominica. It goes on further to say, Section B, those found to be in violation of the 5-year limit according to Section 7 of the Registration of Electors Act and who are therefore no longer eligible to be on the list should be removed. Sheridan, that's it. Way. Simple. If you're not eligible, you should be removed. You're telling me we have to pay somebody $500,000 or I don't know how much it is, if it's US or EC. But I heard he asked for more. And that we cannot fix. Sheridan, if I live in Salisbury, and praise God, maybe you are my friend, I don't know, I can come in Mabouche in Granby and date somebody there. You saying I can vote in Salisbury and still vote in Granby? I cannot do that. And so we really have to establish what is called residency, that you have to live there, work there, stay there. It's very unfair, and I think it's written right there what the Joint Commission is suggesting. And so when people talk about what my good friend there, Dr. Andre, called a red herring about likability and who is the next leader, that is nonsense. That has no issue on the effect of the legitimate elections that are being held in the Commonwealth of Dominica. This is not my opinion. This is what the CCJ is saying. This is what the Joint Commission is saying. And this is what the world will say. So let's forget who is Samuel to prophesize. Who is the next leader? I'm not going to discuss that. So with that being said, I want to thank you very much. I want to thank the listeners. I want to bless Lambi. I want to bless Sherwin, Simeon, Dr. Andre, Dr. Thomson, Fontaine. Thank you for your service to country. God bless you. God bless Dominica. And we hope to have a country that is free and fair and will bring good and prosperity to all of us. Thank you very much.
Dr. Andre, hold your thunder still. I know Dr. Andre really trying to go, but we'll come to you in a while. But two things I want to say as I go to Simeon Joseph to make his closing remarks. Two things. I mean, you first of all, Dion, you mentioned the CCJ making this cursory remark, but it's also a very damning review, of Dominica's electoral process. Very, very damning review of that, right? Although it was not a very extensive comment, but it was very learned comment, very well thought of comment, and put it in a few words. But if you look at it closely, it tells us, fellas, you have to turn a page, go back to the intersection where you all did all these mistakes and take the right turn, go back and do it over. That's what they say. And then secondly, Simeon, one of the things that remains indelibly printed on people's mind is that picture of all these airplanes in Melville Airport. Man, the tarmac couldn't find space to take more planes. And are you telling me, as you're saying, that this thing had no impact on the results of the election? It's only likability? Is that what it is? But the CCJ said, no, that's not true. All the planes you see there is people had come to vote. That's what the CCJ thing is telling you. Yeah, so Simeon, Andre, I suspect you want to say something before I go to Simeon.
Yeah, let Simeon go ahead. Gasso are ready. I'm just getting ready.
Okay,
I don't want to provoke Dr. George. I heard Dr. George speaking very inspirational language tonight. I ain't going to go there. I ain't provoking this man tonight.
Very good, very good, very good, very good.
Leaving him
Nice
alone.
Nice humor to end. Nice humor to end. But in my closing remarks would be this: if I were to draw an analogy, consider I'm building a house, and when I build the house, I have stolen the labor, the sand, the blocks, the cement, the galvanized, the steel to construct that house. And if that is not enough, I would have stolen the television, the stove, the fridge, the bed, the settee to reside in that house. Will I ever be comfortable to continue to live in that house? And so I ask myself the question, will anybody be comfortable to say that they can celebrate victory that they have not have won? How can someone celebrate victory that is stolen? How can someone celebrate victory that they know that you had to steal from to obtain? And so it is akin to me having stolen to build my house and furnish my house. I will always be on the lookout. And I will always want to make sure that anyone who comes close to entering that house with the possibility of removing me from that house, I will want to keep them out. That's what it is akin to. But remember, I began by talking about, Mr. Gregoire, your question this morning, the good, the bad, and the ugly in your advertisement. So I'd like to close by saying,
and the dangerous,
and the dangerous, because we are heading in that slippery slope. But I'd like to end by saying, clearly we have strayed as a country. We have strayed as a people. We have definitely strayed in terms of our leadership and governance of this country and public administration. We have strayed. But I think when one reflects on the ruling of the CCJ and what is happening now, we have a new opportunity to speak to people and for us to examine ourselves. And it boils down to good governance. So we can say Dominica has been deprived of sound leadership and direction. But it is time for Dominicans to take their future in their hands and assume the mantle of championing their future. They have championed the future of their leader for too long and provided the leader with security and comfort and stability, while they have deprived themselves of the very self and deserving security and stability that they should have. So now it is time for them to assume it for themselves so that we can have a better Dominica.
And thank you for those comments.
Very well said, Mr. Joseph.
Extremely well said. But I want to go over to Dr. Thomson Fontaine for his final words and so on. But Dr. Thomson Fontaine, when we spoke to Dr. Sinclair Mitchell a while ago, I wasn't qualified to make that. He asking us who's the leader. I think I left it to Dr. Dion George, who's also partially a man of the cloth. Dr. Dion George gave him a response, and I'm hoping that we will have the privilege to have Dr. Sinclair Michel come back and talk about this issue. But I suspect, Dr. Fontaine, and Dr. Andrew will tell me when I was right. I suspect that Dr. Mitchell saying, but every girl you come in and talking about this thing, are you looking at no leader? But look, all you have a fellow like Thomson Fontaine there. The man over there in South Sudan, if they're advising governments, you have all kind of leaders. I'm not even talking about him while you're not talking about the leader. But as I said, I'm not qualified. Dr. Dion George, who's also pastor, so he's more qualified than I am to answer Dr. Mitchell. So we'll engage Dr. Thompson Fontaine. Let's go over to you for your final words and then closing remarks.
Well, let me just say to Pastor Michel's comments, and I know Pastor Michel very well as well, and two things about the current leadership. And I think that's where I would disagree respectfully with the Pastor Michel, in that this idea that Roosevelt Skerritt is this popular leader is really not true. It's a fallacy. Because if he was, he would not have been stealing and cheating to remain as prime minister, which is what he's done. And the evidence is irrefutable. The evidence is there for all the world to see that Roosevelt Skerritt has maintained his time in office through the stealing of elections. That was clearly laid out by the CCJ, learned judges, just a couple of weeks ago. It is seen by the planes that you talk about lined up on election day in Dominica. It is seen by the bloated list. So this is not a popular leader who can go to an electorate and say, vote me because I have the power to convince you to vote for me. No, I will cheat and steal my way. And the second thing that he's done is to impoverish the population to the point where all people feel indebted. You see, so if this prime minister who so impoverished the Dominican population that they feel that the only access they have to a home is to claim allegiance to him, and he rewards this allegiance with things, whether it's through a red clinic, whether it's through the giving of a ticket to Creole Festival, whether it's, that's how we've been able to maintain and sustain that, allegiance. So he's not, contrary to what people think, this great leader. He's not. He's not. You see, so we have to be careful about that. And what I would like to see is this prime minister, if si quoi c'est un major, give a clean voters list. Okay, do it right. And Pastor Sinclair, as a man of God, would know that God detests cheating and stealing and lying, which is what we have in this prime minister. So let him do it right. Because after all, the voice of the people is the voice of God, and people are crying in Dominica. Our population, they are hurting. They have been dumbed down. They have been impoverished. They have been made poorer and poorer and poorer, whilst one man is getting all of the wealth of the country. That is the reality of Dominica. So this notion that this prime minister is likable and is a great man, yeah, as Mr. G rightly said, with the largesse, unafraid to use the resources of the state for politicking, over $20 million that we can account for in 2019 of taxpayer dollars used to retain himself in office. That does not strike me as a man who is popular and is the will of the people. He's forcing himself on the people of Dominica. That's what he's done. So we don't want this lying, cheating leader for Dominica. We want a leader who can be fair, a leader who is courageous, a leader who is not afraid to face the people, a leader who will do so transparently, a leader who will speak to the people, who will really work to develop their lives, give them opportunities, provide avenues for wealth creation, who will be fair, who will not discriminate. You know, as I said on a previous program, Roosevelt Skerrit is not the Prime Minister of the Labour Party, but that is how he behaves as the Prime Minister of the Labour Party. So he excludes the rest of Dominica who does not support him. So we don't want this template of a leader for Dominica. We don't want this template. We should, all right-thinking Dominicans should reject a cheating liar whose only claim to fame is to remain in office so that he can continue to enrich himself. We should completely reject this model and look for a leader that will care about the well-being of the Dominican public, a leader who will want to see all Dominicans rise equally, not promote a clique over the rest of Dominica, not promote the foreign interests, not have projects in Dominica and encourage foreigners, give foreigners full stake and projects in Dominica paid for with Dominican taxpayer dollars. That is not the leadership we want for Dominica, and that's not the leadership that we should encourage as right-thinking Dominicans. And that's my piece for tonight, Mr. G, and I thank you for the opportunity. And I thank the people of Dominica for listening. The people on Facebook have been there with us throughout. Let me big up to all of you for your comments and for just being there. But, you know, we can change. As I said before, Mr. G, I believe we have a great opportunity to change this narrative. The future of Dominica lies in the balance, but good, right-thinking Dominicans across the globe can unite to make a difference and to make the changes that we need to rid about ourselves of this particular regime and put in place a government for the people and by the people. Thank you.
Yes, but Thomson, I'm still not going to write off Dr. Sinclair Michel as one of the potential leaders that he's looking for. You know why? Because you went and used a word that I haven't heard for a long time. You the word major. And so I don't know whether you're thinking of majors like Frank Barron, he didn't have to 20 elections. Majors like Edward
Oliver Blind. Yes,
like,
James. Yeah, you don't.
Yeah, he knows about these fellas. He knows about these majors. I don't know if he's talking about people like Patrick John, who didn't have to 20 elections to win, and people like Eugenia Charles and Edison James, who did not have to 20 elections to win. I believe he may have been reminding us, look, certain people didn't last too long. Like, for example, Osborne Revere was at the point of becoming a leader, but somehow he didn't make it. Rosie Douglas came in, he didn't last too long. Pierre Charles came in, he didn't last too long. And I don't know what happened, but frankly, you notice leaders started just moving and something happening, and all of a sudden, somebody's there and say, I want to be there for 50 years. I want to be here forever. I don't know. Simeon is a smart fella. He mentioned all kind of big words tonight, fascism, all kind of things that I don't even know how to pronounce these words. But Dr. Andre, you're the historian. You will tell us, because I have no doubts that leaders will arise. I mean, I didn't say anything about Lennox Linton, but Dr. Sinclair must be thinking, while you're not talking about Thomson and Lennox and all this kind of fellas, I don't know. I hope that he will come and clarify some of those things for us.
Sheridan, Simeon also mentioned antithesis and methodology.
Oh my God, I can't pronounce these things, but these things are too big for my chest. I'll leave that for Andre. Dr. Andre?
Well, let me say good evening. Let me congratulate my fellow panelists. And I must thank Dr. Sinclair that he has been the catalyst for all these panelists to be at their eloquent best in their effort and in their outrage at a few of the things he said. Let me indicate that there's a school of thought that success of the current political directorate is based on likability. As Thomson has said so eloquently, you just have to read the CCJ's decision to understand the errant nonsense of that view. The fact of the matter is, likability must be assessed in light of what has happened in Dominica, in terms of the accumulation of wealth, in terms of the buying of votes, in terms of paying people in the diaspora to come to vote, in terms of silencing the opposition. If that is what the good doctor, according to Simeon, the charismatic, well, by implication, doctor, is that if that's what he says, then quite frankly, I will not say more. The fact of the matter is this. He made a big thing of saying, I don't know him. My friend, knowledge is my business. I know more than you think. I know who you went to school with. I know who you associate when you come to Dominica. You are no independent observer. That much I will say. And I can take on the conversation at the next time we exchange views. We've had that discussion before. As I said then, and I say now, you ain't fooling me, because we know that's not true. But let me tell you, give you an aside, a piece of breaking news, Gaston, on your likability argument. The United States has formally requested the extradition of Denzel Douglas, the Kittitian-born doctor who was prime minister of the small Caribbean island nation of St. Kitts and Nevis from 1994 to 2015, to face charges including corruption, fraud, money laundering, along with wire fraud and conspiracy. The U.S. Embassy in Bridgetown submitted the extradition request on July 12th, a few days ago, for Douglas to stand trial in the United States, according to a sealed court filing in Miami dated June the 10th.
But
he is one of the... Yes, go ahead.
Just by way of interjection, has that been verified?
Oh, it has been verified.
Okay.
And we'll hear more about it, quite frankly.
Because
I'm told it was fake news, yeah.
Well, yeah. I stand to be corrected, but that's the latest news I've gotten anyway. And let's face it, don't forget, the same Denzel Douglas was held in England a few years back with 70,000 pounds undeclared carrying out of England. Probably God sent him the money. I don't know. But what I will say tonight is this. Those I deem to be likable are not those who are profiting from the sweat and brows of Dominican taxpayers, but those who walk on Wednesdays through the valley of death, and those who fear no evil. Those who are likable as those who would come on a radio station expressing the views, knowing fully well they'll be ostracized and victimized and vilified because of their audacity to express their views. Those who are likable are those who set an example. Those who are likable are those who help people in distress. Those who are likable are those who abide to law and order in Dominica. Those who are likable are those who, when they receive help for their fellow brothers, they give it to them because their brothers may need it more than them. That is how I measure likability, my friend, not those in office who help themselves at the expense of their own people. Not those who love the Madriques, not those who love the Monfareds, not those who give $30 million in compensation to persons who sell the assets of Dominica. That is not the likability that I look for. I look for likability in terms of goodness, in terms of integrity, in terms of honesty, and those who can call a spade a spade. And that is why I think that even in our darkest hour, there are those who do not profess to have any in-depth knowledge of Scripture, who stand firm and forefront on the backs and on the foundation of justice. That is the likability that we need. And that is the likability we'll fight for. I congratulate and commend Dion, Dr. Fontaine, Simeon, Joseph, Mr. G, Brother Lambie, Sherwin, and all your listeners who have shown a great degree of likability in their own selves. So good night to each and everyone.
And thank you, Dr. Andre. And I want to really express our thanks and our gratitude for all those persons who are still with us on Facebook and still watching on YouTube, still with us in Radio Land all over the globe. Thank you for all of you who are in every community in Dominica and everywhere you are in the region and outside of the region. Thank you so much, Simeon, and thank you, Dion. Thank you, Dr. Thomson Fontaine, although Dr. Sinclair was pointing his finger at you, but it's all right, you can take it. And thank you, Dr. Andre, for being so eloquent and being so real and down to earth as it is. just to live this, as I say good night to the Dominican people, don't be afraid of change. I mean, Dominicans always had change. I remember when Rosie Douglas came to office, oh, people are afraid of change. So he's came and gone, and the Labour Party was out for so many years, and they came back. Don't be afraid of change. It's not the end of the world. You're not really better off red than dead. In other words, I mean, if you were not red, you'd still be alive. You know, so many people are not red and they're alive today. Some of them seem to be much better than the people who are afraid that they might be dead if they're not red. So, I mean, no, you shouldn't be afraid of life. I mean, there's a lot bigger power up there that's looking after all of us. And so I agree that we need to take a close look at our country. After 20-something years in office, it's really time to look at something else. I mean, think about it. I mean, after 20-something years, if your condition has not improved drastically in 20-something years, will it improve in the next 10? In the same, if you do the same thing the same way every time, do you really expect to get a different result? You know, when we talk about housing, for example, you say, look at all these houses. Well, if you build 1,000 houses in 20 years, how many houses is that per year? So how many houses did Patrick John build a year? How many did Baron build a year? How many does it build a year? And so on. The fact of the matter is it might look substantial because of the length of time. But in terms of what you're getting, if you look on the other side of it, how many farmers can still buy their transport cash? How many people can still go to the bank and face them all? How many people are now struggling to pay their light bill and with gas in their vehicle? How many bus drivers are still struggling? This is the point I think we're looking at. So I think don't be afraid of change. You know, take a chance. And I'm saying why I'm saying this, not because of any hatred for anybody in government, but just because you want your country to prosper. And you want to have your people have a chance. So listen, there's too many good people all over the place. Dominicans at home, Dominicans abroad, who would be very willing to come and help the country. But so many have been kept out. Some people, you know, try to come in and they told because you have to either show that you support us or you can't be in. That's not good. I mean, this is not what we've come to. It's what we've come to, but it's not good. That's not where we want to go to. So let me just say good night, everybody, and thank you so much for being here. Good night, Lambi. Good night, Sherwin. Good night, everybody, and thank you for being here tonight, Dr. Sinclair as well. Thank you for contributing to our discussion here tonight.
Thank you.
Bye, Simeon, Dion.
See you guys.
Everybody on Facebook
Dr. Dion.
and everybody everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, guys.